Quite the exciting day of college football, day and night of college football, both on and off the field. Two major jobs have been filled in the coaching ranks here in the last 24 hours. And one unexpected name in particular, at least as far as I'm concerned. We will get to those. And of course, we will focus on the games first and foremost. And we will also talk about what you want to talk about, whether that's the coaching decisions made at Michigan State and Texas A&M, or the games that just concluded and throughout the day here at the Voice of College Football. All right, let's hit the scoreboard. First and foremost, we have a historic day, of course, in the Pac-12 as they're playing their final football games in the Pac-12. And the very final game, the last scheduled game in the Pac-12, is being played right now at the Rose Bowl, fittingly, to a certain extent. That has been the destination, the pursuit of all Pac-12 teams, Pac-10 teams, Pac-8 teams for decades to get to the Rose Bowl. Cal leads UCLA 6-0 late in the second quarter. We've got Wyoming 35, Nevada 6. Late third quarter, with the Cowboys leading, looking to finish at 8-4. Fresno State and San Diego State in Southern California. Bulldogs lead at 7-6 in the second quarter. Hawaii is trailing Colorado State 7-0. That game just kicked off not long ago. They are about halfway through the first quarter. So, hey, some late night college football for all of us to watch. Hawaii and Colorado State should be on for the next 3 hours or so. I don't intend on being here for 3 hours unless there's reason to be here for 3 hours. But we've got a couple hours for you here at the Voice of College Football. And just going final in the snow in Manhattan, Kansas. I believe that nasty stuff is headed our way, I think. Iowa State upset Kansas State 42-35. All right, let's go to the phone lines. You know what happened tonight. Florida State hangs on. Doesn't necessarily, in my estimation, look like a playoff team, but as long as they keep winning, they will be one. They knock off Florida 24-15. Georgia, kind of a workmanlike effort against Georgia Tech. Give it up for the Yellow Jackets hanging in that game. Actually had an onside kick with about 3.5 minutes left as they were only down by one score. Georgia Tech to Georgia. And, of course, on through the day, the Michigan result against Ohio State seems like it was 4 years ago at this point. But, of course, I'm awaiting the TV ratings numbers to come in for that one. That was, I'm sure, the highest rated game of the year, as it typically is anyway, but even more so this year. Alabama with the tremendous finish. Check out the video that I posted highlighting Alabama's finish, Oklahoma State's finish against BYU to get to the Big 12 championship game, and Washington escaping Washington State. And I got to say, again, if they win, they're in the playoffs. So it doesn't matter what I think, of course. It matters what those 13 people in that room think. But Florida State and Washington do not look like playoff teams to me. They do not look like national championship contenders. And I don't say that based on one game. I never jump to a conclusion or have a narrative in my mind built on one game in particular. But I still think the four best teams in college football are playing in two conferences. Even though one of them did not look good today either. Alabama should have lost to Auburn. Wow. So if Alabama wins a national championship this year or gets into the playoff, wow, let's think about what happened on the Plains against Auburn, because that was not a stellar effort by Alabama, but they pulled it out, much like they did 2 years ago on the Plains when Auburn should have won the game, run the ball, and kept it in bounds, but they ran it out of bounds and then gave Alabama and Bryce Young enough time to drive down the field, throw the game, tying touchdown pass, and win in 4 overtimes. And, of course, without that, Alabama doesn't get to the playoff. They do not go to the 21 national championship game. All right. StreamYard giving me some problems, not cooperating with my colors here. What happened? Bingo. Those are the voice of college football colors, the black, the silver, and the red. All right, let's hit the phone lines and let's hear from the real MVP.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
Well, I'm doing just fine. More importantly, how are you doing?
Well, this has been a very up and down type day.
Yeah.
I decided to go make the long trip out there to actually watch the U of L game in person, Mark.
Oh,
And
nice.
it was a great atmosphere. I mean, those fans brought it. And to see Kentucky pull one out in a hostile environment, I mean, it was just poetic. Mark Stoops, I felt like he was good. We had a legit reason to be excited at 7-5. You can say, hey, we've played four top 10 teams. We've got a good recruiting class, one of the best ever for Kentucky football. And now it's all gone. It's over. There's two paths for Kentucky football, Mark. Kentucky football can either get a head coach and we can permanently be in this tier we're currently at, or we can die on the vine and become Indiana football.
So you're talking about really breaking the bank to get the kind of coach that is going to compete in the SEC.
It doesn't have to be a monetary amount. It has to be the correct hire. It has to be a hire that can get good recruits in and can sustain a winning culture and the culture we are currently at. I don't want to do the Jimbo Fisher Texas A&M route where you pay $15 million or dollars per year for a bad coach. I want the right coach.
Sure.
And I think, honestly, the coach we're going to get probably is John Summerall, the head coach of Troy.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you've seen the turnaround for Troy football over the last 2 years. It's been amazing. I'm hoping he can do something like that in the SEC, Mark, but I mean, it's just two different levels of football.
Well, Billy Napier came from that conference, and he played against that team, and we see what is going on with Billy Napier right now. Not that he's not capable and won't turn it around at Florida, but he has yet to do so. Now, understand, it's not like you've had a revolving door there at Kentucky. You did hang on to Mark Stoops for a decade.
I understand that, Mark, but you know what we had before Mark Stoops, right? It was a lot of trash.
Well, a guy by the name of Joker. You had him for a while. Yes, trash.
Perfect name for a coach like him, by the way. Perfect coach.
I know it.
So
I watch Kentucky football not as closely as you, but I watch them every year too, and I know the records, and I know how bad it's been, and I know you don't want to go back there. And I don't know what Mark Stoops was earning at Kentucky. I can't think that he's making that much more money. I'm sure they're going to pay him top 5 money in the country at Texas A&M, but maybe it's more about what they sold him as being the opportunity to recruit top 5 classes and win championships.
Yeah, well, looking back on it, there were some signs that maybe this was his final season.
Okay.
There was his famous pony up comment, Mark. And he also talked about Georgia being able to, quote unquote, buy players. And it's a lot easier to recruit when you can buy players. So those are two signs to me that now it's like, oh, he thinks he hit a hard ceiling at Kentucky. And at Texas A&M, he isn't going to be able to hit this hard ceiling. And he can just do whatever he wants. Because I've seen people on Twitter look at his record, talk about him not winning SEC teams. And people need to understand, we're talking about a coach at Kentucky. The expectations need to be set to where you're completely in the doormat of the basement. You were below Vanderbilt, Mark. We were below Vanderbilt. And now we're a middle-of-the-pack SEC team. And in some years, one of the top 5 SEC teams. Not often, but in 2018 and 2021, I would argue. And I didn't think that could ever happen for Kentucky football. So if Stoops does more with his talent and has great talent at Texas A&M, I feel like he can do an excellent job there.
Yeah, and with the conference being what it is in regards to both television revenue and potential for other revenue, just like the teams in the Big Ten, what would need to be explained to me is I know that there's something about name brand, prestige, and all of that, but we're talking about 17 and 18-year-old kids. And I would think that if Kentucky is earning roughly the same amount of money in regards to television, and I know television doesn't take into account big boosters, and I don't know what kind of money that Kentucky is able to take in with NIL and all of that. Why some of these other schools from these two conferences in particular, and maybe it's going to happen once we kick into this next television contract and once NIL becomes a regular process. We're only 2 to 3 years into NIL, that we're going to see other schools emerge, but I don't see any changing on the landscape. And maybe does Kentucky, do you believe, is Kentucky football hurt by basketball being number one?
I obviously think there's at least a perception, which will play into the recruiting. But from what I've heard from the local KSR type people, NIL money was spent to get the wide receiver and Devin Leary. So Kentucky's willing to throw around money, from what it seems like, to get their players that they want. So I don't think that should be an issue, because Devin Leary, if I remember, was the number one transfer quarterback in last year's class. Correct, Mark?
Yes. I and others thought he was the best out there. He didn't play like it, but yeah, he was the most sought after. He was the highest ranked according to 247 Sports, and I did a video, and I, off the top of my head, believe I had him there as well.
So if you're able to throw around money enough to attract him, isn't that a good sign that there's a strong enough NIL program to ward off the big names?
Yeah, that's a good sign. I know that there are outlets that at least attempt to track that sort of thing. I've also heard that they're not very accurate, so I haven't paid that much attention to know. Again, now that we've transitioned into this NIL market and this era, I have been curious to see if anyone breaks out that wasn't currently a player before, or one of the blue bloods or one of the elites that was behind the eight ball and not able to stay in this current market. But I'm not seeing that. And that also makes sense, because typically the money that the boosters were committing to resources, facilities, upgrades, coaching staff, all of that could be, and obviously boosters were not paying the coaches directly. They're paid by the school and paid by the state, depending on the school's public status. But that all goes into the pot. And then whatever we would all believe about recruiting under the table and the money that was handed to these recruits before NIL, that those would be the same boosters that would be funding NIL. So I didn't expect things to change. It doesn't look like things have changed, but there's been a hint of, well, Miami being ahead of the NIL game when that broke free, and Louisville being a major player in NIL. So I was just, again, curious about Kentucky and whether they can hope to do better going forward or maintain what Mark Stoops built.
Right. I think it's most important. You can't go below, because I feel like if you go below, you're done. Like, I don't see going below then coming back up. You have to maintain at this point, especially with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. Oh Lord, Mark. I mean, it's just trouble. This is just worst case scenario, Mark. I mean, it just is. Like, and in 2021, I thought we were in good shape. We gave Mark this long contract extension. We defended LSU. We defended USC. We defended all these big power names. And then I guess Texas A&M's just got that oil money on top of oil money, apparently, or some voodoo magic there.
This goes to show you, and we experienced this 2 years ago with Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly in particular, and other coaches, but they're the two hot shots that have been the most highly publicized guys that have left elite programs to go to other elite programs, that what the media thinks it knows doesn't usually turn out to be the case. Now, I know that they got about 10 or 12 hours ahead of this and the Jonathan Smith to Michigan State, but I'm talking about days and weeks in advance that we had two Texas A&M guys on here, and I'm not faulting them in any such way, but they're affiliated with major sites, 247 Sports and somewhere else. And even going through CBS Sports, ESPN articles, while I had them on, ripping through 10, 15, 20 names of coaches, I don't know that I came across Mark Stoops. It doesn't seem like the coaches that get hired for these positions are typically the candidates that are initially on the media's short list.
I completely agree with you, and in some relief, it's been terrifying. It's kind of good that this happened because I don't know, you can't relate to this because you're Ohio State fan, but if you're an Oregon State, if you're a middle of the rung team, the worst part of the season is the off season, especially this time of year, because you're terrified you're going to lose your coach. Because if you lose your coach, you believe it's over. And I know Connor Johnson, Clint Moses, and those Oregon State fans are probably going through it right now, and I just want to be with them in solidarity because we could both be going down at the same time.
You know, I never really thought about that. I'm not going to state my age, but I've got a ton of years on you, and probably most people watching. I give indication as to how old I am. I've been a college football fan since the late 70s. I guess I never really processed it that way. I have never seen an Ohio State coach leave to go to a better job. They've always just fired their coach.
Right. And you've always had the confidence that they're going to get it right. Or if they don't get it right immediately, they're going to get it right eventually.
Yeah.
I don't have that confidence.
Yeah. And got somebody that was desired, that somebody that just about everybody was happy with getting. Yeah.
Right. And I'm just, what do you think, Mark? What do you think about this move? Do you for Texas A&M, do you think this is the best choice they could have had? Because that's another narrative I'm seeing going out there, that they quote unquote settled for Mark Stoops.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that, because to me, I made the comment to both of these Texas A&M writers. I said, okay, it is going to be interesting because Texas A&M just swallowed $77 million and they just fired a well-known national championship winning coach. You would think that if cooler heads prevailed and wisdom prevailed, you just focus on getting the best coach. You don't care if it causes a big splash. You don't care who's happy about it. If the fans know who the guy is, you don't care about all those things. You are committed to the choice of hiring the best football coach with the best vision and the smartest mind to assemble the staff and be the best leader and all that. Are you sold on this guy? Not, oh, he's a name, let's grab him. And apparently, maybe there wasn't that guy out there that they were able to get who was either the big splash or the up and coming guy, early 40s, mid 40s. This is going to be the next guy that's going to elevate as a great football coach coming up through the ranks, either as a big offensive defensive coordinator at a major school or as a group of five guy that's ascending. And Mark Stoops, you can't name many coaches out there that would be a safer selection. So I think they're in good hands, but it doesn't seem like an over the top kind of hire.
I completely agree with you. And maybe
I'm sorry, Real. I'll just add this on because he's never done it anywhere. And that's not his fault. Again, his first major job was at Kentucky, and he elevated that program higher than anything we've seen in 50 years. So not his fault, but they did not hire a guy who's proven to be a championship coach elsewhere. Now, there's not a whole lot of those guys out there, granted, but they didn't get one of those guys.
I was just thinking, we talked about this before, but maybe this was one of those overcorrection moves we talk about. Last time they get Jimbo Fisher, a big name, flashy hire, they think it's going to work out. Now they go with the complete opposite in that, basically in a complete safe auction. Do you think that could be a factor?
Yes. And also, this guy is well known within college football circles. He's extremely well respected, and maybe marrying his strengths with the flash of an SEC power brand in Texas, tons of money, oil money, facilities, 100,000 people in the seats every game. That might be what they need.
Yeah, and he's shown he's been able to build a culture from nothing. And I think Texas A&M needs that because there was a perception the 2022 class was bought for. Even Nick Saban alluded to it.
Yep.
And maybe they decided we just need a good culture in here. Even if he doesn't succeed on the coaching decisions, he can get us a good baseline for the next coach, potentially, at worst.
So since you have had a pretty microscopic look at Mark Stoops' tenure at Kentucky, again, I think he is one of the most respected coaches in the country. And like you say, he instilled a culture where there was none or a bad one. He elevated recruiting. He changed the focus of recruiting to counter some of his competitors in the division and in the conference to look for players elsewhere. He did a lot of things right. Is there any weakness in his game?
Well, there's obviously he's had questionable coaching decisions in big games before, and he's never been able to break that ceiling. Like, he gets to a ceiling and he kind of stays there for a while, and then he'll break it. So, like the winning records of SEC's thing, a lot of people who criticize him says, hey, you've only beaten like 2 teams that are 5-3 or better in the SEC. And people don't know if that's a Mark Stoops issue or a Kentucky issue.
Well, I think it's a Kentucky issue that he was not able to solve. Maybe somebody else can.
I agree. In terms of what I think about Mark Stoops as a coach, I mean, he's able to get rid of offensive coordinators. He's usually able to make the right hires. Rich Scangarello was just a terrible hire, so that was against him. But he got his offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, back. He's willing to bring in great recruiting classes, and he did it from a unique plate, which mainly is Youngstown, Ohio. So I don't know if there's how many big weaknesses this guy's got. I mean, clock management issues I've heard in the past, he's been iffy on them, like in terms of in-game stuff, but I think he does a terrific job, Mark. I really do. And this has been devastating.
Well, unfortunately for you, Darrell, because of the change in scheduling format in the SEC, you're going to see Mark Stoops in Texas A&M a lot more frequently than you would have under the old model. You're going to see him every 2 or 3 years.
I'm aware, and you know what? That'll be exciting. I mean, it's kind of weird. I don't know what I should do as a fan at this point because the only reason Kentucky's basically been successful for a very long time is because of Mark Stoops. Do I adopt Texas A&M as the second team? I feel like that's what a lot of Kentucky fans are going to do.
Really?
To be honest with you. Oh, yeah.
I bet you a lot. Mad.
No, I think grateful is the word.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a very mature and humble way to approach it. Okay.
Well, Mark, when you've been as bad as Kentucky has been for as long as Kentucky has, it's like finding water in the middle of the desert. It might not be it might not be an ocean size of water. It might not even be a lake, but you know what? It's water and you need it to live. And we're so thankful for that. I mean, people have already talked about building Mark Stoops a statue and all this stuff. People have already said, and I have said it, I think he's the greatest coach in Kentucky football history. So we're just very happy we're relevant, Mark. I mean, we've never been relevant before, basically, unless you count the 1950s, which how many people here have been around for that? So
Yeah, well, I hope for the best. And again, that may not be a name that wows people, but yeah, Summerall at Troy. I had kicked around his name in some conversations for some other jobs that I thought might be open, but I was not anticipating Kentucky.
well, from what I've heard, John Summerall has pretty strong ties to Lexington. So I think if he was offered the job, he would take it. I think he kind of knows the culture. I think he kind of knows the players. To give respect, Josh Pate does his power rankings, not top 25, but power rankings, right, Mark?
Well, no, I'm not aware, but go ahead.
He does power rankings, and Troy is actually in the top 25 as the 25th best team in the country.
Oh,
so
I got you. He believes that Troy's the 25th best team in the country. Gotcha. Okay.
Which is incredible for a group of 5 team.
Yeah.
For them to be power rated that high. But you brought up Billy Napier earlier, and that's something I'm very worried about is, do you think he can recruit and succeed on the big stage?
Well, usually when a coach is successful, they usually are pretty immediately successful, and he's not been. Now, it's taken a couple different coaches 2 and 3 years to get going. But that's usually at a school that's more of a development type school. Usually the coaches that turn out to be successful show it almost immediately. I don't know where this team's really improved in 2 seasons on the field. I know he's recruiting well, and I think that's the one aspect of all this that has kept him off the hot seat, is that they're going to bring in a top-notch recruiting class. Otherwise, if he was bringing in a 15 to 20 ranked recruiting class for a second consecutive year, he may not have survived this second season.
Correct. I completely agree with you, Mark. Well, people want me to get to some other games, so I'll brief. I had plenty of notes for other games, but when your whole program just goes up in smoke, you got to talk about it, Mark. I mean, I know you can't relate as an Ohio State fan, and first off, Mark, condolences to you. I'm sorry your team is so soft you can't beat Michigan again. Just I can't relate to losing to your rival, Mark. It's tough. I'm sorry, I just can't relate.
Yeah, you can't relate to that. That's one thing that you certainly, yes, have way over Ohio State at this point. They lose the wrong game every year.
That's correct, Mark. And can I ask you? We had a conversation about the greatness of the SEC beforehand. I mean, Mark, SEC number 1 now. Are we on top?
Well, I got to run the numbers just because Kentucky beat Louisville.
Well, Florida almost beat Florida State.
Okay,
they almost did it.
Almost beat Florida State. Okay,
Kentucky Georgia beat Georgia Tech. That's a good win. Now you may say, wait a minute, record-wise, Georgia Tech is a 6-6 team. But if you look at the standings, Georgia Tech is a top 5 ACC team.
Okay, but we would all expect Georgia, who is a 24-point favorite, to take care of Georgia Tech. So that's just taking care of business. There was one big SEC win today.
Yeah, we got one big one. We were close in 2 other games. South Carolina, Clemson was close.
Run the numbers. I'll run the numbers now that we've cleared all the non-conference games. Let me jot that down. I was thinking, as soon as I get off here tonight, I'm going to be making this long list of all this content I got to produce, because we're at that point of the season where coaching changes and rankings and transfer portal and all this other business I got to kind of process. And championship game previews. Now, if I was going to do power rankings, I'd keep Ohio State in the top 4. I'd keep Ohio State ranked ahead of Washington and Florida State.
I would imagine the people in Vegas also would probably do the same thing. I mean, you lose to what? The first or second best team in the country power rating wise by 6 points and you had to drop to win the game at their home field. Isn't that basically what's expected out of a top 4 team?
Yeah.
So, but people got to be weird. When you barely lose to a team that you're equal to, you got to drop like 5 places. It really doesn't make sense, Mark.
No, and I'm going to wrestle with that because my rankings again are first and foremost win-loss rankings, but they are based on schedule and how you perform and how you play. In Washington, they just beat a 5-7 Washington State team by the skin of their teeth, and this has been how many times out that they've been extremely unimpressive. So, and Florida State is not exactly wowing me with their play.
Well, Mark, anyway, that's all I got for you tonight. Fight on to 4th and 31.
Yeah, what a play that was. Think about that. If Auburn defends that play, Alabama's got a second loss. They're out of the playoff race. But I know Nick Saban's been burned a few times by some dramatic plays in key situations, but most of the time during his career, those things have worked out. But what do they say about luck? Luck is what is the saying? That luck is the invention of hard work or the conclusion of hard work. Somebody help me out with that saying. All right. We have not heard from Reasonable Gump for quite some time. Reasonable Gump, how you doing tonight?
Well, what a night for you to hear from me, wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yes, you won the Iron Bowl, so I would expect this would be the night to hear from you.
Oh my God! Did you watch the whole game, or did you see the end, or?
I definitely saw the end. I saw like the last 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah, that was just such a ridiculous game all the way through. We completely either were just looking ahead to Georgia or just completely forgot how to play football for almost 60 minutes. I'm pretty sure Auburn had been looking forward to us, and that's why they got boat raced by New Mexico State. There were just penalties all over the place. The refs couldn't keep them in their pockets. And turns out when there was a big brawl at the end of the game, the refs had run out of flags because they didn't throw anything for that. It was nuts. It was wild all up and down the field for the entire night. Jordan Hare is built on an ancient Indian burial ground. I am fully convinced of that. Both Alabama and Georgia fans know this to be true. Just weird things happen there. But as Saban said in his post-game interview, a lot of weird things happen here, but one of them finally went our way.
Well, lest he forget 2 years ago, when you talk about how weird this game, doesn't this game seem very similar to 2 years ago?
Oh, it does. Oh, yeah. I was making the comparison in my head the whole time. I guess I sort of differentiate it because while the Tank Bigsby mess up did happen last year, we still had to muscle and fight our way back all 99 yards down the field and score that last touchdown. This game just ended on just a series of 3 completely weird and boneheaded plays that, I mean, none of them should ever happen, but they all did.
Speaking of the snap, the throwing the ball past the line of scrimmage, and then the final play.
So, okay, so maybe just 2, because blown snaps happen, particularly with this team. But since you didn't watch the whole game, let me tell you this. Jalen Milroe running in front of the line and then trying to throw it like that. Or he actually tried to get back behind the line and then throw it. That was the 3rd illegal forward pass of that game. That you usually don't see one in an entire game. That was the 3rd that whole game. Auburn did one on their first possession, and then Jalen Milroe did it twice. One, he had an easy touchdown. He didn't need to throw it at all. He just needed to run it in. That was in the first half. And then that one that you saw when he had just pretty much lost his mind from, we're about to lose the game. He that bumbled snap, which I don't think was his fault. I think the center snapped it too early. But so yeah, that was the third illegal forward pass of the game. Just to give you an idea of how ridiculous the whole game was.
Yeah, well, nobody at this stage of his career is going to, confuse him with Peyton Manning's knowledge of the game.
No, but at this late in the season, you really shouldn't be doing that. You need to know where the line of scrimmage is. I mean, you agree, right? Quarterbacks rarely make that mistake as it is.
Sure.
So, but yeah, and then that last pass. I mean, Mark, look, if you're going to rush two, because that's what they did. They rushed two and they left a spy. The spy was not rushing at all. They just had two. If you're going to do that, shouldn't you just tell 8 safeties to go stand in the end zone, make a line, and all watch the quarter? You don't even have to cover anybody. Just watch the quarterback, and when he throws the ball, everyone go to where the ball is. That's all you should have to do.
Well, yeah, if you line up almost like a picket fence at the goal line,
yeah.
then you're talking about 8 of the fastest players on the field that you're asking to do that, and they should have the athleticism to be able to, cover 10 yards behind them, considering the angle that you would have to throw the ball over them to get it back there. And then if anything's thrown underneath, they should be able to converge to tackle it. Yes.
Exactly. I mean, we see Hail Mary throws into the last second Hail Mary throws into the end zone all the time. What usually happens? It usually ends up being a 50-50 ball with, 3 or 4 players from each team all watching the ball and all jumping up and trying to grab it. That's usually what happens in these kind of situations. But no, Auburn decides to play man-to-man. Since they had 8 players back there and we had 5 receivers, that means they got to double up 3 of our receivers and single cover the other 2. So Milroe threw it to one that was single covered, and we managed to get it. I mean, that was just that's boneheaded to me. Auburn was playing great defense all night, and then they somehow just whiffed in the worst way possible.
Yeah, I can't really come up with the reason why that can't be effective. Now, that situation doesn't come up very often, but 4th and goal at the 31-yard line. But that's what they decided to do. Now, the downside to that is obviously Jalen Milroe can stand there and, read a book while he's trying to figure out where to throw the ball.
I mean, if I were doing it, I certainly would have brought at least 3. I would have probably put 7 back there and sent 3. Maybe. Actually, you know what? The spy is stupid because if Jalen Milroe decides to run, well, like you said, he's got 31 yards to do it, and you would have at least 7, guys out there watching him, hopefully, and saying, "Oh, he's going to try and run it."
Everyone's this. The more I think that is the way to go, because if you line up 7 or 8 guys across the goal line and he takes off and runs, then if you can't tackle him with 7 guys converging on a guy that's got to run 31 yards for a touchdown, then you've got serious problems, number 1. And then number 2, regardless of how much time he has to throw the ball, unlike a normal in-game play where when a quarterback has a ton of time to throw, defensive backs have to chase their receivers, their man-to-man responsibilities all over the field, and they get worn out. And they also, obviously, there's more likelihood that somebody's going to make a cut and they're going to get lost and they're going to get free. But in this situation, you all are standing there watching him, and he's got to either run it through you or throw it over you. And so you don't need to be running around. You just hold your ground until he makes his move.
Bingo. Yes. Or like you said, you should have been watching him, but no, they're all running around trying to chase down and lock down their man. When it's like, you don't need to do that. Just watch the quarterback. He's going to throw it somewhere. The ball has to travel 31 yards. That'll give any of you who are even remotely close to it time to get over to it and bat it down. And and the spy on the quarterback is a stupid idea. he shouldn't have just been standing there spying. He should have been trying to get pressure on Miller because, like you said, he got to read a whole book, drink a cup of coffee, and then throw the ball.
Yeah, again, the spy's trying to prevent the quarterback in a regular game situation from converting a 3rd and 7 or whatever, not that he's got to run 31 yards for a touchdown. Yeah, you might as well just chase him around and make him throw it.
Well, we remember 2nd and 26. I wonder if this is going to become known as 4th and 31.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I don't even know what to think going forward. I would give this team probably maybe a 10% chance or something of beating Georgia, but I would have given them less 2 years ago, and they managed to do it, and they did it in impressive fashion too. So I don't really know.
Well, I know that I'm giving a bit of a double standard here because I just trounced all over Washington and Florida State for not impressing me and looking like playoff teams. Well, Alabama certainly did not at all tonight either, but I still think that they're one of the 4 best teams in college football.
Well, we'll see. I gotta make a small correction to the real MVP before me. Love him and everything, but Bear Bryant is the best coach Kentucky's ever had. I don't even think that's debatable. I mean, come on.
If Bear Bryant would have done nothing but coach Kentucky and then leave and never coach anywhere else, would you still say the same thing? I know he did nice things at Kentucky, but we have to consider the Mark Stoops Kentucky program that he inherited versus what Bear Bryant inherited. I think that's the point.
Yeah, but Bear Bryant won an undefeated Sugar Bowl and a national championship at Kentucky. Mark Stoops has a losing record in the SEC. I mean, I'm not saying Mark Stoops isn't a good coach, but I mean, come on, I don't see how it's even possible to say Mark Stoops is a better coach than Bear Bryant was at Kentucky.
Well, in some aspects, similar to athletes themselves, I think it's difficult to compare what coaches accomplished in the 1950s versus 70 years later.
Yeah, that's fair, but I still don't think it overrides that. But anyway, that's all.
For the record, he did not go undefeated. He went 11-1.
1950 Kentucky Wildcats went 10-0 and won the 1951 Sugar Bowl over Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, then Wikipedia is wrong because I see 11-1. Okay.
All right. Anyway, interestingly enough, so while you were talking to DeReal, I was browsing Reddit, college football, and trying to find a single positive reaction from Texas A&M fans on this hire, and I can't. I found some hilariously negative ones, which I won't bother reading because it'll take too much time. But I don't think Texas A&M fans are very happy about this. I think they're about as miserable about it as the real MVP seems to be. And what's even kind of funnier is I don't see too many negative Kentucky comments on here either. So they're pretty indifferent toward it.
Well, who did they want that was a reasonable choice?
I thought they were going to go after Mike Elko pretty hard.
Yeah. Yep, he was the first one that came to mind for me and the first one that I threw out there.
But I will say that I think the misery and the complaining is more from the fact that they spent $80 million to end up at Mark Stoops. If they had fired Jimbo for $20 million or something and then ended up at Mark Stoops, I don't think there would be much of a problem. I think it's the fact that they gave up that much money and this is where they ended up. So I think that's where the misery really lies.
Yeah. Well, he's a safe hire. He knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. All right. We'll see. That's all I got. A crazy, ridiculous game, Iron Bowl. But we won, and it is a little bit cathartic to win in that fashion sometimes. So I'll let you get on, man. Good talking to you.
All right,
again.
Reasonable Gump. Good to hear from you. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Probably the caller tonight that has been watching us for the longest time, I would think, right there with Reasonable Gump. All right, let's get to it here. We've got Austin. Thank you for the contribution, sir. Says, as an Ole Miss fan, I'm terrified that Florida will fire Billy Napier and go get Lane Kiffin. I'm scared. Are my fears legit? Well, that's an interesting play you got going there. I don't believe that Billy Napier is going to get fired. I do not believe. I've had enough people tell me that I trust, that know the landscape there and what's going on, and with the recruiting class that he has bringing in. And again, like I told an earlier caller, I think that's the one thing that's saving him from a serious hot seat, is that he's bringing in what should be a top 5 to 10 recruiting class. It's ranked in that place right now, and we're only 3 weeks away from National Signing Day. But shoot, these coaches are getting fired and taking all of us by surprise a number of times. So maybe Florida's figuring that out right now. I don't know how they view the last few weeks of Florida football. I don't view it very well. This team has not improved. It's not gotten better. The recruiting class is one thing, but anybody should be able to recruit at Florida that's going to hustle more than Dan Mullen. So I hope they don't put, for their sake, too much stock in the recruiting class that he's bringing in, because, again, you're the University of Florida. You're in the arguably the best football playing state in America. And wow, Lane Kiffin to Florida. I had not considered that one. You know what? Now that you mention it, yes, be fearful. If that's what you're going to be fearful in life there, Austin, be fearful. But you know what? My overriding advice beyond that is don't fear anything. Fear is the worst thing you can have in your life. So rid yourself of that. If Ole Miss gets one Lane Kiffin, then you know what? The sun will come up and you will get another coach and you will continue playing football. All right. We've got Lemansky, who says here, keep the faith, Buckeyes. USC would take Ryan Day in 30 seconds. I believe they would. I believe you are correct on that one, Lemansky. Georgia Reload says, I'm glad we don't have to play Ohio State. That was the only game that scared me. Well, Georgia Reload, you were very, very kind and humble and honest to say that. So that's very nice of you. Doesn't appear as though Ohio State's going to be playing any more meaningful football this year. And I hate to say that about an Orange Bowl game, but can't think that they're going to be too motivated or have their best players show up in Miami to play Louisville in the Orange Bowl. All right, let's get to the next call here at the Voice of College Football. We got McD Sports on the line. McD, what's going on?
Mark, how you doing?
I am doing well, sir.
So, Mark, before I dive into my thoughts on Mark Stoops and throughout this crazy day of college football, I do want to congratulate the new Big Ten passing leader of all time, the most passing yards ever in the Big Ten.
Really?
Tola Tagovailoa. I when that popped, I was like, he really has that record. He beat Curtis Painter, the former Purdue quarterback.
So he's played 3 full seasons, and the 2020 year where they only played 7 games. I think they were 2-5 or 2-4.
3-4.
3-4. Okay.
So, or 2-3. 2-3. But
okay, only 5 games.
Yeah. But
good
all-time passing leader. Yeah. And Maryland can only muster up 8 possible wins, including this season, if they win the bowl game with that.
Well, passing yards are a bit of an overrated stat. Now, a lot of that comes from trailing in games. And I got to say, when I saw the final score, I did not see any plays from that game. I thought, okay, this Rutgers team has played fairly well this year. And Maryland has found a way to lose to the likes of Northwestern and Illinois and play within a field goal of Nebraska. They're awful too. and they've played their best games again for a second straight year against Ohio State and Michigan. If they could just bring it every week, then maybe they would find themselves in an upper division place there in the Big Ten.
True, and I'll make one more point because I know no one wants to hear about the Maryland Terps besides me. I need Mike Loxley to go to Columbia, Missouri, and figure out what Eli Drinkwitz is doing, and take some of that and bring it back to College Park. I'll just say that, and I'll go and I'll move on to Mark Stoops. Mark, I am not surprised at all Mark Stoops left Kentucky. I'm not. I am a little bit surprised he took the Texas A&M job. I'll be honest with that. And I'll be honest with you, I did. One of the guys on the Cover 3 podcast did allude to this, saying this is a possibility. So I'm not like stunned by this or anything, but I am not surprised at all he left Kentucky. I felt like he maxed out everything there at Kentucky, and he wanted a change of scenery.
Yeah, well, I think more than a change of scenery, as I mentioned to the real MVP, just he probably doesn't see any more opportunity to maximize and compete for a championship at Kentucky, and Texas A&M offers those kind of resources.
And I agree, it's a safe hire. I think with the new college football playoff starting next year, he'll probably be a 10th, 11th, 12th seed every few years, but that's probably the best you're going to get out of Mark Stoops, in my opinion. I will say this, and what led me to think that he might have been done after this game at Kentucky, is a few years ago, right before the whole NIL deal, not the deal, but the whole NIL scene, Mark Stoops came out and basically said he has a radio show, I think, there every week. He signed a big extension. He said he believes the resources are at the University of Kentucky to win championships, which they weren't. Let's be real, they weren't. But if he believed that, great. In Kentucky, they had their head coach. This year on his radio show back in October, he didn't come out and say like he did, I think, back in 2021 when he signed that big extension. But he basically alluded to he didn't think the resources were at Kentucky. I mean, if you pay attention to, and I kind of read into it some, it was kind of written on the wall. Either this year or next year was going to be his last year at Kentucky. He was going to leave. Now, for Kentucky, there's a guy. Now, I can tell you who probably wants the job. I don't know if Kentucky will hire him. I wouldn't hire him. And that's the West Virginia head coach, Neil Brown. That's his dream job. I know he'll probably want that job. I would not hire him if I'm Kentucky. I think Kentucky, I don't know where they go. I mean, there is a guy on ESPN that supposedly he interviewed for the Syracuse job. I'm referring to Dan Mullen, by the way. Maybe you go after him because of the familiarity in the SEC. I wouldn't do that personally.
No,
no.
No. You don't want either one of those guys.
Well, those are just names that are coming up that are popping up in my mind. I know. I wouldn't hire either one. I know that's Neil Brown's dream job, the Kentucky head coaching job. I know that for a fact.
Well, if Neil Brown truly wants the Kentucky head coaching job, he needs to do something in West Virginia that is worthy of getting him the Kentucky head coaching job. So he has yet to do that.
True.
And then Dan Mullen. No, Dan Mullen.
Can you imagine him at Syracuse?
No, I can't imagine Dan Mullen. Although that might be a good place for him because Syracuse is probably going to bring in the same recruiting classes, whether he's there or not, or whether he, takes his feet off of his desk to recruit or not. They're probably going to get the same level of athlete. So then he can just take whatever comes in the door and scheme it up because that's what he does best. He did a really nice job at Florida his first 3 seasons, but just to run down the list of stupid, idiotic things that he did his last season there is unbelievable.
here's my advice to Dan Mullen. I actually think he's great on TV. I would say just stay on TV.
Yeah, it's an easy. You get to watch football and you get to be an expert, which he is, and you just get to talk about it all the time and make a couple million a year.
I don't even think he's making that. But
I don't know about that.
well, the only reason I say that is because Dan Pollock, the guy that used to be on Game Day, was only making $80K a year being on
Who?
Game Day. Dan Pollock. I might be
Who's
saying.
that?
Am I saying the name wrong?
Dan who? Where did he coach?
No, he didn't coach. He was a former ESPN analyst on College Game Day. I'm saying the name wrong. He played for Georgia.
Oh, David Pollock.
David Pollock.
David Pollock didn't make $80,000 a year.
I read he made $80K a year.
No.
He wasn't making much, but
I can't imagine with all the work that David Pollock was doing at ESPN that he was making $80,000 a year. If he was making $80,000 a year, then I feel a whole lot better about what I was making at ESPN. No, they don't pay those guys.
I'm reading it right here. I'm reading it right here. Right here. I just type in David Pollock's annual salary at ESPN. He made about $600K during the course of his NFL career. While working for ESPN, he was paid an annual salary of $81,650.
Where's that coming from?
Here, Sportskeeda.
Does it have everybody's supposed salaries?
Let me click on it.
Because I would like to see what Dan Mullen's making. Because David Pollock's role at ESPN was much more highly publicized and higher status than Dan Mullen's is.
It just has his salary because this was when he was, I guess, dropped back in July.
Yeah. Well, you've got more evidence than I do. I'm just going based on what I know about what these guys make. And it's hard for me to believe that that's the truth.
It's hard for me to believe it as well. And someone in the StreamYard chat did say that source is junk. So maybe they're just throwing it out there. But that's what I read back in July, and that's what popped up for me. But back to the games today. Mark, the reason why Ohio State lost is from one reason and one reason only. Because Michigan's a better team than them. It doesn't matter who's coaching Michigan. They're just a better team. J.J. McCarthy's better. The running backs are better. The overall, the defense is better. The defensive schemes are better. And I'm not trying to rip Jim Knowles, but I mean, he got outcoached again in this game. And he was brought in from Oklahoma State to basically fix the defense. Because
All
of
right.
this happened.
So I'm trying to process everything that you're just saying right here, McD, and I'm trying to add it up and make it make sense. Because if you're telling me if the quarterback's better, the running backs are better, the offensive line's better, the entire defense is better, and the defensive coordinator, all of those are on Michigan's side, and they barely won a game in which they got outgained at home and were gifted a bit of a turnover and a missed field goal. Otherwise, Ohio State clearly wins that game. Then I don't know that adds up.
That's because Ohio State has the best player on the field out.
Oh, because of one guy. He made up for all that.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
He made up for having a deficiency at quarterback, running back.
I'm not saying they're bad.
Offensive line, the entire defense, and the defensive coordinator.
I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying Michigan's are better.
No, they're not. No.
We just have to agree to disagree on that.
Yes, we are. Michigan's got a better quarterback and better cornerbacks, although Ohio State's 2 are top 10 in the nation.
Yeah, I
Michigan's
agree.
are exceptional.
It's close.
And better collection of tight ends because Ohio State plays 1. They played 2 excellent ones. And a certain assorted offensive and defensive linemen are better, but not collectively. Are they? If they're better, then it's by
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
that much.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm trying to get at.
I think Ohio
It's
State's got a
close.
better running back room.
I
They got a better
disagree.
They've got a better wide receiver room,
Oh yeah, definitely. Marvin Harrison
and
Jr. should go
I think
first
they've got a
overall.
better defense.
Marvin Harrison Jr. should go first overall, in my opinion, over
Yeah,
Caleb
well,
Williams and them. But
that's for somebody else to decide. I don't have an
true.
opinion on that. When has a wide receiver ever gone first in the NFL draft?
Keyshawn Johnson, I think, was the last one
Yeah.
before I was born. But and I agree with you, Mark. At worst, Ohio State should be ranked number 5. At worst, they should be dropped to 5. And if Florida State, I think everybody's ranked a foregone conclusion. Oh, Florida State's going to beat Louisville in the ACC championship game. I don't think that's a foregone conclusion. I think Oregon beats Washington. I think Oregon gets back into the college football playoffs because I think, I think I definitely give Alabama a shot against Georgia. I think Georgia will win the game at the end, but I don't think it's crazy to say Alabama's going to win that game, and they'll probably they'll be in at 12-1 if they win the SEC championship game. So where does that leave Georgia? I mean, Florida State will be out if they lose. Washington and Oregon basically swap each other, so you have Michigan there. So is it a tough path for Ohio State, in my opinion? Yes. I do think there's a path there, though.
Oh, it's a path, but it's full of landmines and it's about that narrow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
They
like
need
last year.
they really need to be honest, they really need Florida State to lose.
Yeah, they needed Florida State to lose tonight. But if they lose this game in the ACC title game, that wipes out the ACC. And they need Georgia to win. They need Texas to lose.
I think Texas will lose.
If they get those 2 things, if they get a Texas loss and a Florida State loss and a Georgia win, then the committee is basically going to determine should the Pac-12 loser be in over Ohio State.
Well, not the Pac-12 loser.
Yeah, the Pac-12 loser.
The Pac-12 winner, because
depending on who loses. If it's Washington,
I think if Washington loses, they're out. I think they're. I agree with you. I'm not wowed by them. I do agree they should be there if they win. I mean, you gotta put a 13-0 team in there, but I think Oregon's gonna revenge their loss. I picked Oregon in the preseason, make the college football playoffs, and I still wholeheartedly believe that. I think they're gonna win this game, this Pac-12 championship game, and I think it's gonna be them. I think Michigan will get in. I think Georgia will get in. I think it's gonna be between Ohio State and Florida State and Texas, and I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say it's gonna be Ohio State. I think
McD, you became my favorite person. Nobody else is going to surpass your phone call.
I think Louisville has a real shot against Florida State. I really do. I don't care that they lost to Kentucky. I mean, I was not impressed with either one of them today. Let's just say that. And
No, I wasn't either.
And one other thing, because I'm sure you have a bunch of callers, Mark, I do want to touch on something I do have to eat my words on a little bit, but that's okay. I came around late on this. Michigan State made an outstanding hire, in my opinion.
Yes.
And Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. I remember a few years ago, when you were doing the Pac-12 head coaching rankings, you ranked him 4th, and I called here and I questioned you about it because I was like, And I was wrong. I mean, he built that program from the ground up. I do not blame him for leaving Oregon State because let's be real, Oregon State, who knows what conference they're going to be in next year. The only question I have about Jonathan Smith is if Oregon State was guaranteed to be in some form of the Pac-12, let's say the Pac-12 stayed together, or if Oregon State went to the Big 12 or the Big 10 or the ACC, I don't think they would have ever been in the SEC. But let's say that, would he have stayed at Oregon State? That's the what if there. But I think year one, it's probably going to be kind of a struggling year there for Michigan State. But this is an excellent hire. Michigan State should get around this guy. Should get around Jonathan Smith. And he's someone I don't think he'll ever win Big Ten championship games at Michigan State, especially with the 4 schools on the West Coast coming in. But he could go 9-4, 10-3 most years. Maybe back himself into a 12 seed in the playoffs. I do think the playoff is going to eventually get expanded to 16 seeds. He can make it most years at 16 seeds, or at least like 50%. I mean, this is an excellent hire by Michigan State. I have to admit, as a Maryland Terps fan, I was kind of hoping Michigan State fumbled the ball again with the hire because I was not that high on Mel Tucker's hire. Despite him coming in and having that 11-2 season, I still thought that it was a lot of flukiness because he relied so heavily on the transfer portal. Jonathan Smith I know he took the quarterback from Clemson, DJ Uiagalelei, in the transfer portal, but he's going to build that program from the ground up. As a Maryland fan, the hire scares me as a Maryland fan because I look in the Big Ten. I don't expect Maryland to compete for Big Ten championships, obviously, but I want them to every now and then be like with Mizzou, who, by the way, I would not want to face Mizzou, whoever they get in a New Year's Six Bowl. I'm just going to throw that out there. But I would I kind of want to be like a Mizzou, what Eli Drinkwitz is doing, because he's recruiting locally. He's winning 10 games this year. I mean, he's not going to do that every year, Eli Drinkwitz, but that's why I would kind of want Maryland to be. Jonathan Smith's going to do that at Michigan State. So I know I rambled there a little bit, but I think it's an excellent hire. I think it's an A+ hire. I really do. But
Absolutely. All right, McD,
Yep.
we appreciate it.
Go
Have
Terps.
a good night.
You too.
Our buddy McD chiming in with his Maryland football talk, and he's absolutely right about Jonathan Smith. And I guess he did probably rail on me after I placed Jonathan Smith as he's telling me the 4th best coach in the Pac-12, and that was way before he had success there. Yes, Michigan State hit a home run. This fell into their lap to get an excellent coach, like a top 15 coach in the country, who's having his school be demoted into group of 5 ranks, basically, that does not have a place to play football, that is opening up his entry to Michigan State. They fell into this one. So hopefully for Michigan State fans, this makes up for Mel Tucker, which I at the time called that a pretty horrific hire. He went 5-7 in Colorado. That was his 1 year as a head coach, and he gets a head coaching job at Michigan State. Why? All right, let's grab this super chat. Mr. Bombastic, missed you on the Michigan Live, but wanted to say thanks for always giving us quality content, Mark. God bless you and your fans. Well, Mr. Bombastic, I appreciate that so much. Thank you for that. Getting a lot of love and super chats from Michigan fans today. They must feel sorry for me. Hopefully McD is right and Ohio State can backdoor into a playoff spot. Although I do not. There are just way too many things that have to happen. I am not holding my breath. As I believe I'm going to have to dig up last year's show this same weekend after the Ohio State-Michigan game, because I do think I was carving out a path for them to make the playoffs, because it was pretty simple, pretty clear last year, but not this year. It's pretty clear this year. There's just too many hurdles. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Jeffrey here.
I will definitely try to keep it quick, Mark, because there's a lot of people in the private chat wanting to get on. I know I called in earlier, but man, I had to call back to talk about some of the results today and everything going on. But first things first, I do have to bring up about Mark Stoops. Pete Thamel over at ESPN is reporting that he's staying at Kentucky right now. A&M is not hiring him. That is the new report, for real. It just came out like 5 minutes ago. Everybody's saying it in chat. It was on Twitter.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
So now that Mark Stoops is not going to Texas A&M, I put on Twitter, I said this is great news for the Aggies. I'll explain why in a sec. But yes, it is true that he is not leaving unless this report's wrong. Right there. Kentucky's Mark Stoops will not be the next Texas A&M coach. ESPN can confirm. That's what he says. Right, just an hour after the world was breaking down on the Kentucky and A&M side that he was going to Texas A&M. Now it's been reverted. So I don't know. I mean, my opinion on this, I don't know what I've heard you say that it was a safe hire, Mark, but in my opinion, I thought it was a bad hire because if you're gonna, I know that he's not a bad coach, and I said that because I tweeted this an hour ago. I said he's a good coach. I like Mark Stoops fine. He's done a pretty good job at Kentucky, especially for how bad Kentucky's been. But if you're gonna fire Jimbo Fisher for $75 million, how can you go out there and hire Mark Stoops? Doesn't make any sense. It makes absolutely no sense. I don't even know if Mike Elko would even make sense, even though I know what he's done at Duke. It's just Texas A&M went 8-4 every year with Jimbo Fisher, roughly. Kevin Sumlin, they went 8-4 every year. You have to make sure that your hire is going to be someone better than that. Like if they were able to get Urban Meyer, Ryan Day out of the blue, which again, odds are not great, I guess. But if you were able to get a guy like that, you're going to be better than that. But if you get Stoops and if you get Elka, someone like that, it's not guaranteed you're going to be better than 8-4. I understand Stoops did what he did at Kentucky, and you would think he'd do more with more talent and money at Texas A&M. I just don't know if it's proven when he hasn't ever done it. I understand he's at Kentucky. I get the differences between the two. But Jimbo Fisher won a title at Florida State, goes to A&M, and he's just average. I understand that people said he didn't develop his offense, but I think this is great for A&M that Stoops is not going to be the next head coach if they can get someone better.
Well, I said some of the same things that, I think Mark Stoops is an excellent football coach. I think he's one of the top 15 or 20 coaches in America. But I think if you're firing Jimbo Fisher, who I thought should have been fired, you also have to have a plan as to who you're going to hire or who you have. You've got some kind of short list of guys that are going to satisfy not the fan base, but satisfy the hire, that are going to be good enough to hire to make a difference. And you got to be confident that you're going to be able to hire one of your short list of 3 or 4 or 5 coaches. And so I don't know where Texas A&M stands on that now that Mark Stoops isn't going to go there. It'd be interesting to know if that was a faulty report initially or if something broke down in negotiations.
See, that was going to be my next question. You basically just answered it, but that was going to be my next question. I was going to ask why you think that it was reported and then now it's just they backtrack. Was it a fake report or was it, a negotiation? Because, I mean, it's kind of hilarious if negotiating went bad after an hour, at 11 o'clock at night. It could have just been a fake report. I don't know, but it's hilarious because everybody was sold on it. I wasn't sure. I mean, I was about like 50% sure maybe this is legit, maybe it wasn't. So when I tweeted about it, I said it kind of in like maybe terms, like because again it wasn't confirmed yet. But yeah, I don't know. This is just hilarious how an hour later it's now reported that he's not going to be the A&M coach after it was saying that he was. So it just shows you how crazy college football is on and off the field these days. It's also being reported, so I guess it's not confirmed, but Jeff Lebby is going to be the new Mississippi State head coach as well. If that is true or not, I don't know because of this, but it seems to be he'll be the hire.
Yeah, that was the first name I heard as soon as the job was open, that they were going to be going after him. I don't know that he has connections to Mississippi State, but that seems like a logical hire. They've had a rough year, both in win-loss, but also especially in offense, that they would want to go out and get, they just had success with Mike Leach. And they had success with Dan Mullen. So they had success with top level offensive minds, and then they got away with that for one season. Didn't work out well, that they would want to go back to that.
For sure.
But in terms of the Mark Stoops thing, I think a whole lot of things could happen. There have been all sorts of coaching type decisions like this in the past that were misreported. It could be somebody wanting to be the first, and they were able to get some kind of thread of evidence that that's what was taking place even before, just because they were given word or leak that there were conversations between the two. They ran with that thinking Mark Stoops is going to take this job. He's not going to leave Kentucky to go to Texas A&M and make more money. And like you say, have more resources in recruiting. So maybe somebody ran with it, or maybe he did have a change of heart. That has happened. You know, we can go through tons of coaches on the NFL and college football levels that have backed out of jobs.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's tough though, you know, as someone trying to talk, you know, sports and stuff and recover and everything, you know, to see a report like that, and you're like getting, you know, together, like, you know what, get some stats and figures, you know, talk about this, and then it's not true. And now you're back to the drawing board again. It's funny. It's hilarious. It's like, it's even worse for these people that are like employed with these companies. They're like, man, we got to report on this. It's expected. He's gonna be hired. Wait a minute. Breaking news. It's not happening. I mean, it just makes you look terrible. It's hilarious, but
well,
that's
yeah,
the news business for you.
I'm just sorry that I didn't cut a video on Mark Stoops going to Texas A&M, because a lot of people most likely would have watched it, and then I would have had to do another video that
I already had a thumbnail for it. I'm just be honest with you, Mark. I already had a thumbnail for it. I've already deleted it. And then it'll be reported he's going back there and I'll have to remake it. So I don't know. It's hilarious. But yeah, definitely, Mark, I totally get you on that. But I wanted to say too, you made me laugh earlier. I didn't even mention, I don't know how, sometimes I have so much in my head when I try to call in, you know, get all these thoughts out for to you, Mark. But man, you made me laugh so much when that guy was doing the Empire Strikes Back song for Star Wars or whatever. And you're like, nah, I'm not doing this. I'm not getting copyright. That just cracked me up. So saying when you got mad that night and you said the F word a couple times, you just crack me up sometimes. Some of the stuff you say, man, it's just hilarious.
Yeah, I just wasn't going to have any of that. And I basically, I don't know. Can you still hear me when you click out of here?
Well, I can still hear you, like if I'm still in the waiting room,
Gotcha.
I can hear you. But
Yeah.
if I like get way out of it, then
Yeah.
no.
He's a longtime caller. He's obviously welcome, but you know, it just came out of my mouth that, you know, if you're going to continue,
I don't even understand the copyright rule, like how long you can do something. Like what I get confused anyway, so I don't even mess with it. I don't want to get in trouble at all on it.
Yeah, I don't mess with it either, because I've had a window open on my laptop, didn't even intend on having anything, and it was on the air for 3 seconds, and I get copyrighted and everything gets wiped out. So
it stinks. That's the YouTube rules for you.
Yes.
And they're definitely they vary from channel to channel. It makes absolutely no sense. But to actually get to some games just really quick, 'cause again, I know there's tons of people in chat and they're going to get sick of me saying that because their private chat is rolling. You got a lot of people tonight. Well deserved for you, because you do a great job, and because this weekend of college football was absolutely insane. 4th and 31. I'm watching this game. My family losing their mind. The funny thing is, instead of being, you know, listen with my fan watching the game, I was actually on with John. So this is my 3rd time being on here today, and the 4th time in the last 24 hours, which is a world record for me. But I was on with John while it all broke down. I was watching the TV and I saw, you know, the botch, you know, snap and everything, and then the illegal forward pass from Milroe, and I'm like, oh no, it's all over. And then 4th and 31. Jalen Milroe to Isaiah Bond in the left corner, just like 2 years ago, as he reminded one of the previous callers. Ja'Cory Brooks in the right corner of the end zone saved Alabama's skin against Auburn 2 years ago, now again today. Unbelievable from Alabama. And I just think it's so funny that the chat's like, Alabama's not a top 10 team. They're terrible because they barely beat a 6-win team. Georgia barely beat Georgia Tech. And last year, Georgia won it all, and they barely beat Missouri, who last year was not as good, and Kent State. Can a team have a bad game as long as they win? I mean, I just think it's funny. Like, they won the game, even if all odds tell you otherwise.
And barely beat the same Auburn team.
And barely beat the same Auburn team. Absolutely, Mark, 100%. And they barely beat South Carolina. I mean, I don't understand how people take a result like that and say Alabama's terrible. Do I think Alabama's good as they used to be? No, I've said it every single week I've called in to you, Mark, this year. They're not as good as they're in the past, but they're not Clemson. And even Clemson's not awful, as you can tell. You've even said they're probably the second best team in the ACC, which thank you, Louisville, for proving that today. But Clemson's still decent, even though they're not what they were. But Alabama's still really good, and there's an argument to be made that they're one of the 4 best teams still. They're pushing it a bit with some of these results like the Arkansas game and today, but still, they're a good team. I just don't get why people take one result like that, and then for other teams, they don't use it. Because, I mean, Washington's look poor. Because someone asked me in chat just a few minutes ago, they said, who's my top 4? I'm like, well, the top 4 is going to be, Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State. But who it should be based on how they're playing right now is Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia. That's the top 4 based on how they're playing right now. Because Ohio State didn't play bad today. Oregon's blowing everyone out, but Washington beat Oregon, so they're going to be ahead. And Florida State's winning their games, but without Travis, they don't look as good. And Washington struggled mightily last couple of weeks. But based on how, the results are, that's going to be the top 4, Washington, Florida State, Georgia, Michigan, even if it shouldn't be the top 4. It's not – they say it's the 4 best teams, but it's the record. Because if it's 4 best teams, it's not those 4.
Yeah, well, it's, of course, debatable. But, I think that the teams that are playing the best, I think Oregon's is playing amazing football right now. And I certainly think that Georgia played one of those kind of games tonight that they just knew that they were going to be able to handle business, take care of business. And it wasn't as close as the final score would indicate. I had that game on the entire time, even though I was more focused on Florida and Florida State. So I'm pretty confident Georgia, Oregon, Michigan are definitely the 3 teams that are playing the best football.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would go with Ohio State next, but I think it's close with a lot of other teams like Texas, like Bama, even though they did what they did today. I'm not just looking at the last game, but the last several weeks. Those would be the teams that I think are playing the best and are the best. But it's going to go exactly the way you say. It's going to be the Pac-12 championship winner is going to be in the playoff. And then we'll see if the SEC is able to get 2 spots if Bama pulls off an upset. And, Florida State's most likely going to win the ACC. I don't think Louisville's going to hang with them. I don't think, but it's possible. I'm not going to be shocked if they do, but I think they're really going to have to play an A game against Florida State's, C+ kind of game. And we're all assuming Michigan's going to beat Iowa, which they should.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that offense, they're not even going to be able to do anything with that Michigan defense. I mean, you would think, but you never know. You got to play the games or not, play it on paper. But, I mean, you talk about Florida State, though, in Louisville. I've talked to a few Louisville fans, and they've said that, well, if we beat Florida State, and this is even after the Kentucky loss today, if we beat Florida State and people say we only won because Travis wasn't in Florida State, that's not fair. We're actually a decent team. And I'm like, okay, so if you win by 3, do you really believe that you would have won the game by 3 if Travis is in? More than likely. Again, you have to say more than likely could, because if you say it concrete, then people say, well, you're not taking, the other side into account that this could happen. And then if you're not solid with your prediction, then people say that, well, you're being wishy-washy. So you can't please everybody. That's the way it works on the internet. Definitely, love that aspect of it. But, I mean, you talk about, again, and that's fair. Like, I would even make that assessment. It's just someone doesn't matter. Like, if Louisville beat Florida State by 3, I would be like, well, they won because Florida State's not as good right now. And Travis being out is a big deal. I mean, if Louisville beats them by 30, I mean, you pull up a different argument. But even then, if Travis is in, they're not going to get destroyed. I mean, it's like the Tennessee-South Carolina game. The only reason South Carolina, when they beat Tennessee the way they did that year with Hendon Hooker, could make the argument that they won the game, even if Hooker had played the full games, because they were already winning the game when he got injured. We don't have that argument here because Travis is out. He's gone. So again, if Louisville won, it's just not the way it works. And see, it's the same argument goes for Florida State, because people are saying if Florida State beats Louisville and they make the playoff, they don't deserve to be there because they don't look like one of the 4 best teams right now. And that's true. They don't, but they won the games. You have to put them there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You could just ramble about it forever, and I probably would for another hour if I was able to. But again, tons of people in chat. Appreciate you for taking my call, Mars. A lot of great games. Can't believe UNC blew it. That was terrible. They're just abysmal, absolutely abysmal. But it's
I had a
crazy.
lot of trust in NC State. I picked them to win.
I should have picked NC State. I went with Carolina, thought they would do it, but I shouldn't have done it. But yeah, it was a great day of college football. These coaching hires and firings and everywhere. I mean, I'm going to have to make sure that they're legit before I make any more thumbnails. Got to make sure they're legit, and then it'll be all right. But again, I hope you have a great rest of your night, Mark. Again, great day of college football. I can't believe the regular season's already done, and it's going to be the end of the Pac-12 after this Cal-UCLA game. Sad there as well, but I can't wait to talk to you soon, Mark.
All right, Jeffrey. Thanks.
Everyone like and subscribe. See you, Mark.
Thanks, man. All right. We will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. I'm curious to hear Mike Fort's formula with the SEC left out of the playoffs. But we got Chris Jenkins on the line. Chris, how you doing?
Doing good. Kind of disappointed that the Aggies didn't go through with hiring Mark Stoops. That would have been absolutely hilarious as a Longhorn fan.
Well, other than hearing that Pete Thelma reported that it's not going to happen, do we know who ended the negotiations?
I don't know. Probably the Aggie fans on Twitter who were making a big fuss about it. The big donors and College Station probably raised such a fuss to where that they didn't want that to go through. I was really hoping that was going to fall through because, man, I was really looking forward to actually whooping up on a Stoops named team for once. But I heard you say that earlier that you think Alabama is one of the top 4 teams in the country.
Yes.
Do you believe that Texas is also a top 4 team in the country?
No.
Do you not believe that results on the field matter?
Yeah. This is what you're not understanding. So let me clarify. There's a difference between what I believe teams should be ranked or what I believe their quality is versus what they should be ranked. Those are two different things.
Do you believe
I have Texas ranked ahead of Alabama because they won the game?
Yes. So if you were
they're better, that means they won the game. So
if you were
ranked, so they should be given preference and ranked because they won the head-to-head matchup. That doesn't mean they're better. We can all point to examples of games of teams that won games over other teams that aren't necessarily better.
Well, do you believe if you're a part of the college football playoff committee, would you put Texas ahead of Alabama?
Yeah, I just said that in my rankings, have Texas ranked ahead of Alabama.
Yes. So
as long as they have the same record and they won head-to-head, I will rank Texas ahead of Alabama.
Okay, yeah, we agree on that.
Yep, absolutely. That doesn't mean I think they're better. That means I think they should be ranked higher.
Okay.
They won the game.
There's a huge majority of the college football fans that don't believe. They say that it's the 4 best teams at the end of the year. And I know going into the 12-team playoff next year, they're saying, it's going to eliminate the product on the field. It's just, wins and losses in certain games aren't going to matter as much. And it's just going to be whoever's there at the end of the year. And I feel like that conversation might end up happening if, say, Alabama beats Georgia next week, and Texas is going to play Oklahoma State, who isn't very good, in my opinion. I mean, you've seen the teams they've lost to this year, UCF, South Florida, and say Alabama beats Georgia next week, and they do it let's say by double digits. Texas beats Oklahoma State, let's say by a field goal. And everything happens how it should for Alabama to make it into the college football playoff on the final rankings. Do you still believe that Texas would still be ranked ahead of Alabama?
Well, let me say two things first. One would be, let me clarify my position. Texas beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa by 2 scores.
And that should be
Therefore,
a open and shut case right there alone.
absolutely, as long as they've got the same record.
Right.
Absolutely. Otherwise, why are we playing football games?
Exactly.
Okay, so the result, Texas had a definitive win in that game. All right. But, and my personal belief on who's better than whom, I do think that it's a toss-up between Alabama and Texas. Now, I don't believe it should be a toss-up in terms of where they should be ranked. I'm talking about reality. I believe it's a toss-up as to who the better team is, and I tend to lean in Alabama's direction. But I don't believe that that should factor into rankings. I believe that Ohio State's still one of the 4 best teams in the country, but they shouldn't be going to the playoffs.
I don't know about that.
Well,
What I've seen
I
from
understand
Ohio
you don't know
State,
about
what
that.
I've seen, what I
I'm stating to you what my opinion is.
okay.
So again, I'm just making another example that I still believe Ohio State's a better football team than Michigan, but they lost to them today. There are football teams that lose to other football teams every weekend that are better than those teams. It happens every weekend. Okay, let's get back to the committee. The committee, my experience with committees is this vote and the way these teams are ranked is probably coming down one of 2 ways. Anytime there's a committee, there are people in that room that have the ear of everyone else. They're just more dominant people. They're better at arguing. They're more persuasive. They're more on top of their game. So they probably run the room. So whoever those people are, we don't know. There could be 2 of them, 5 of them, 6 of them. Or when they come to a stalemate in a situation like, okay, because I guarantee you, Chris, that there are people in that committee that are just basically, they're very nuanced people that say, I don't care what the result was in September. I think Alabama is better than Texas. So I'm voting for Alabama ahead of Texas. And then there are other people that are on the opposite end of the spectrum that basically say, I don't care what's happened since then. As long as Texas has the same record and they won head to head, they have earned that right to be ranked ahead of Alabama. And there is no way that they all agree on that. So they either, the people that have more influence and persuasion in the room run the room, or they just take a blind vote or a not blind vote and say, everybody who thinks Alabama should be ranked ahead of Texas, raise your hand. Everybody that thinks Texas should be ranked ahead of Alabama, raise your hand. That's how that room is most likely run. One of those 2 ways.
And I believe if you did that in the majority of the college football fandom community right now, if you took a survey of 100 people,
yeah,
and asked who is better, Texas or Alabama, I would say, just by what I see on social media, not necessarily the pollsters and stuff, obviously, because they have Texas above Alabama, I would say 80% would say they would put Alabama above Texas. Based on what?
Based on
what?
how they
Based
feel.
on,
That's the problem with
based on how they feel.
Yes.
How do they feel? How did they feel after Alabama only beat Arkansas by 3? Would they still put Alabama above Texas, even though Texas beat them in Tuscaloosa by 10?
Well, we can go through all sorts of examples of where Texas didn't look good and where Alabama didn't look good. They both
Well,
have
yeah,
those games.
but I feel like there's this huge spectrum of fans that completely ignore the product that happened on the field.
Oh, you're right. Maybe this will make you feel better, Chris. It's based
it's not
on
really that makes me feel better. It's just
I understand what
like
you're saying. Yes,
as
yes.
a college football
That was a
fan
poor choice of words.
in
Okay.
general,
Yes.
like if Oklahoma had one loss right now, Oklahoma should be ranked ahead of Texas, in my opinion.
Yes. Exactly. And they weren't.
Yeah, and I did not agree with that.
Yes. So you're holding to your principles.
Yes,
very
until
good.
until Oklahoma lost to Oklahoma
Yes.
State, that's when they deserve to drop to
Yes.
wherever they are now, 13 or whatever it is.
Now, before I say this other bit, understand that you can't always hold to a head-to-head result. Sometimes there's a round robin of games that runs in a circle, in a loop.
Well, yeah, of course.
Like that happened in the Pac-12 this year, where you had 4 teams all ranked in the top 25. Well, Utah beat UCLA, and UCLA beat Washington State, and Washington State beat Oregon State, and Oregon State beat Utah. So you can't rank them in order. But you're right. I completely agree with everything that you just stated about that.
And
I am just telling you, let me just say this. That with all due respect to everyone that's watching and listening, because these people support me and they're here every day for me. When you say that 80% of college football nation believes that Alabama should be ranked ahead of Texas,
that's just based on what I've seen.
It's just based on your yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I can't say that I have a lot of respect for the opinions of most college football fans. I actually have respect for very few opinions of college football fans. Most of them don't know what they're talking about, but that's fine. They're fans. They are accountants for a living, or they drive trucks, or whatever they do for a living. That's what they do as a profession. They're just fans. So I don't expect them to be logical or to be knowledgeable.
Right. I agree. I mean, and as fans, we all have our opinion, and
we're
I
all
try
biased.
to see my yeah, and I go by what happens on the field, and what I've seen on the field, I can even say it for Michigan. And I can just go by what the talking heads say on TV, even the pollsters, and by how they do things. The product on the field, by what I see from Michigan, by what I see from Georgia, I mean, is there really I don't see this big gap between Georgia to Alabama, in my opinion. Everyone struggled against unranked teams. Look at Georgia today. Look at Alabama today. If I hear 4th and 31 one more time, if I hear it one more time, it doesn't matter if y'all were 4th and 56. Y'all almost lost to a team that lost to New Mexico State
by 3
last
touchdowns.
week. And everybody dogged Texas by getting by.
Yeah, getting by.
And then today we see these teams. We see Alabama against Auburn tonight. I haven't heard one word about. I mean, Alabama has struggled. No, I hear 4th and 31 in the execution that Alabama needed to win. I hear Georgia. They did what they had to do to win, and they were strong doing it. You won by 8 to a 6-5 team, 6-6 now, and Georgia's done it all year. I mean, they've beat up on. I mean, Tennessee. Come on, they're not the 21st ranked team in the nation. Come on, they got four losses. But when Texas was doing it in the past 6 weeks, with 2.5 weeks, mind you, was with our backup quarterback.
I've got
But
an answer for this.
Texas got dogged.
Yes, we
About
understand all this,
they
Chris.
struggled
Chris,
and got it.
You don't have to convince me on all this.
No,
I know
I'm not. I'm
exactly,
not. I'm
I know
trying to get
exactly
it
what you're
through. I'm
talking
trying
about.
to get it. Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm going to answer your question as to why you hear what you hear. There's two basic reasons. Number one, Georgia and Alabama belong in the SEC. That's one. Number two is that past Georgia and Alabama teams have earned the respect of people by winning huge games and winning championships.
But we're not in the past. We're in the year of
You are
2023.
correct. You are correct. All these teams should be judged on only what happened in 2023, but people are not like that.
Oh, man, Mark, you hit the nail on the head right there. You should be a fortune teller or something.
Yeah, we both know that if you gave Alabama the same results as another team,
If Alabama had played the same way Texas had since Texas lost to Oklahoma, I was at that game at the Cotton Bowl when Texas lost, and I mean it heartbroke me. I mean the Texas side of that state, it was depressing leaving that stadium, but we still were like, what? We lost by 10 seconds left on the clock. We lost to that team. I mean, that was a fluke, in my opinion.
Yeah, if you don't reach the playoffs, you can blame that game, and obviously,
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
You can
what I
blame
tell everybody I
Brees
know.
and his defensive coordinator.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
Chris, let me give you one example. Let me give you one example, and you can answer this question for me. Then you can have your last say, and then I need to move on. Okay. Let's say Alabama and Texas played, and the exact outcome happened as it did in September in Tuscaloosa. Okay. But let's say the rest of Texas's schedule was horrible. Every team they played was 0-12, and they beat them all by 1 point. Okay.
Okay.
And let's say Alabama played Georgia, Florida State, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, USC, whoever you want to fill in, the best teams in the country. And they beat them all by 5 touchdowns. Would that in any way sway your opinion on where those two teams should be ranked?
Yeah, because you're playing top 5 teams every week.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
That's a unfair that's an unfair analogy. I mean,
not really.
Well,
no,
yeah, because you're saying a team that lost to the team that's going. Well, yeah, you're
a made
saying,
up scenario.
You're saying a team that lost to the team that's going to go on and play teams that are going on to win no games.
It's not an analogy. It is a made up scenario to test how much you are tied to and attached to head to head, meaning everything regardless. That's all I was asking. Just wanted to know. Okay. So you are admitting that the rest of the resume should be taken into account to some degree.
Well, if you're playing top 5 teams every single week, yeah, and the other teams playing teams that don't win a game the rest of the year, yeah, that doesn't make much sense in my opinion.
Okay.
But
all right, Chris.
No, well, I have another thing about the A&M situation.
All right, one more thing.
If A&M was such a top job in the country, why aren't we hearing more big name candidates trying to get that job? Why are we hearing the names of Mark Stoops, Mike Elko. I mean, there's a bunch of no-name guys. Why are we? I want to know. I want to know.
How often does a top of the line coach leave a top program to go to another top program? I can only think of 2 in the last like 15 or 20 years.
I can think of Lincoln Riley
In the same week.
in the same week.
Yes. So Brian Kelly, leaves Notre
Brian
Dame.
Kelly,
LSU.
Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly.
Usually it doesn't happen like that.
No, but
so
do you believe that Jimbo Fisher rode the coattails of Jameis Winston at Florida State? Or do you believe that he was actually a top-tier coach that was at Florida State and his true colors came out when he was the coach at A&M?
well, it's always easier
Because I believe he rode the
Did you
coattails.
ask me a question or did you want to make your statement?
Well, no, I asked you a question.
You asked me a question and kept talking. All right.
Sorry.
It's easier to have perspective 10 years later on a situation from 10 years earlier. So yes, it's easier to see that most likely that Jameis Winston and the talent that he recruited and signed had much to do with his success, as it does with every coach. I tend to rank coaches higher when they've proven that they can win in different situations with different schools, or at least at one school with a cycle of different quarterbacks and different rosters. Jimbo Fisher didn't necessarily do that at Florida State. He had one short span of dominance or near dominance.
So you agree with me that he rode the coattails of Jameis Winston at Florida State?
Well,
and
I wouldn't phrase
he
it like
rode that to that huge contract at A&M.
Well, he won New Year's 6 games and ACC titles without Jameis Winston as well. So it's not like I'm not going to use the same terminology that you just did, because that would be an overstatement. Yeah, great coaches need great players to win championships.
Well, they're the ones that recruit them, right?
Yes.
And do you believe Jimbo is in that category of a great coach, or is he just the product of he got a great class at one point? Because he had the number 1 recruiting class at A&M, and look what he did with it.
The answer is neither. I neither think that he is a great elite coach, nor do I think that he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. No, he coached the team. He signed the players. He was in charge of the program. He did not take over a great program at Florida State. That Florida State program, at the point that he took over Florida State, was in its worst shape in 35 years. So he did have to, he certainly had a program that had a lot of resources. Of course, nobody's winning without resources.
Right. And he had unlimited resources at A&M. What do you think went wrong for him at A&M? Like, what was like top recruiting classes, unlimited money for NIL?
Well, I mean,
what ultimately went wrong for him?
His first issue is that he's coaching in the same division as the greatest dynasty in college football. So that's one issue. But in terms of what he did wrong, he didn't hire a first-rate offensive coordinator and allow him. He tried to do too much. He tried to run an offense that's 10 or 15 years old in 2020, 21, 22, 23, and didn't go out and get a great young offensive mind to run his offense and just be a head coach and be a CEO.
Okay. All right.
All right, Chris, I better run. I
Mark,
appreciate the call, sir.
Have a good night.
You too.
I appreciate it.
All right, let's keep it going. We got Mike Fort on the line. Mike, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Mark. How you doing?
I am doing just fine.
So I've
Are
already
you
been on
still-
enough today. So,
Are you still on cloud nine?
oh yeah, I'm going to be riding this for a while.
Sure.
There's one thing I didn't like. I think nobody's mentioned earlier. I did not like the fact that Florida put Rodemaker back in after he took that massive club from the two Florida guys.
Yeah. I would think that it would be mandatory that he would have to get officially checked.
Yeah, I mean that reeked of concussion protocol because I remember seeing the replay. I mean, not only did he get sandwiched between two Florida guys, but his head just smacked into that turf. I mean, it just looked like a bullet travel. I mean, maybe it looks worse than it was on replay, but it did not look good. I don't know how he got put back in.
Well, he was out for what? Maybe 3 plays?
Yeah, not nearly enough.
So I don't know how much they checked him out. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it was more than just how many fingers am I holding up? Okay, good, get back in there.
Yeah.
And to bring up the thing earlier, when I'm talking about the SEC could get left out. I mean, if Washington, Texas, Florida State, and Alabama all won, which is not even remotely out of the realm of possibility, the SEC could get left out because then you got 3 undefeated teams in Michigan. I mean, we're just going to assume that, no offense to any Iowa fans in here, we're just going to say that Michigan is just a foregone conclusion. Washington beats Oregon, and then Florida State beats Louisville. So you got 3 undefeated teams, and then the other one. I mean, and I was listening to what you said earlier, but if Texas had just barely beat a bunch of crap teams, and Alabama was just rolling over a bunch of the super teams, I would be with you. But that's not the case because, I mean, Texas, Houston was definitely not a good win. TCU was definitely not a good win. Kansas State wasn't a good win. In fact,
Kansas State's not a good win?
I think Kansas State was close, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. If you're talking about a dominant win. No, it was not a dominant win.
But then Alabama also looked like, now you can sit there and say we won about Auburn, but a team that just lost by 3 touchdowns to New Mexico State, for them to win on the damnedest play I've seen this year for a 4th and 31, they look terrible against Arkansas. They look terrible against South Florida. So, I think that in that case, the heads up match where they beat Tuscaloosa they beat them in Tuscaloosa by double digits. As a 1-loss team, I put them over a 1-loss Alabama, with them both having 1 loss and both winning their conferences.
Sure.
So, I don't think keeping the SEC out if all those dominoes line up, like I said, that's not out of the question.
No, it only takes 4 results, but you wouldn't want to play that parlay. But you're right. It could happen.
Well, the only thing that I would be probably the kind of X factor in that one for that 4 is Washington beating Oregon, because it would be on a neutral field, and Washington has played worse since the Oregon game, and Oregon has played better since the Washington game. That would be the game I'd be a little bit nervous about of those.
Yeah, I think that Texas and Florida State are substantial favorites, and they should be, and they have somewhere in the 80% chance of winning category. I'm a little bit more confident in Texas, but not by a whole lot. I'm confident in both of them winning those games.
Yeah.
But if either one of them lose, especially Florida State, I'm not going to be surprised. But now, yeah, I also think it's going to take quite a Herculean effort for Alabama to beat Georgia. That's going to be a substantial win for them to do that. They're probably going to be a 4 or 5 point underdog.
Really? I mean, I would favor Georgia over Alabama, but if you told me that Bama beat Georgia, I mean, if you could just, if you were to time travel in the future a week and then come back and say Bama beat Georgia, I'd say, oh, okay. I wouldn't be like, oh my God.
Well,
I-
I'm not going to say, oh my God, to any of those results. None of those results would surprise me. The most surprising result would be Iowa beating Michigan. That would
Yeah.
be number one.
Yeah, easily.
Then after that, I guess Louisville beating Florida State, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, no, I would say probably Oklahoma State beating Texas probably be second on my list.
Georgia has opened as a 5.5 point favorite.
That high? I would have figured it'd probably be closer to like 3.5, 4. Well, yeah, okay, yeah. The game's in Georgia. Technically, it's neutral field, but it is in Atlanta. But I mean, to hear Alabama fans, Atlanta's a second home for them.
Florida State is only a 4.5 point favorite.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if you hear that anybody out there that's a better, own that one.
I guess.
I'm sorry, but I see no statistical likelihood that Louisville can cover that.
You see no way they can cover that.
No, it would be highly unlikely. It would surprise me if Louisville covered that with, what do you say, 4?
4.5.
Yeah, I would say Florida State by at least a touchdown.
You saw that Florida State was losing tonight against Florida, a 5-7 Florida team in the fourth quarter.
And I saw Louisville just lose to a slightly better Kentucky game.
Yeah,
At
I
home.
understand that, but I thought you'd seen a lot more football than that to be surprised at Louisville possibly beating Florida State.
It's not that I think Florida State is that great of a team. I don't, but I just think Louisville is probably, well, there's no doubt Louisville's the worst one. Well, now 2-loss team out there. I can't think of any. I'd struggle right now to think of a 2-loss team worse than Louisville, and this includes Iowa.
Okay, I agree.
So I that's my scenario for the SEC getting left out. And like I said, would I bet the parlay? No, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. Michael Hogue's mad at me because I ripped on his coach.
How did you rip on his coach?
Well, Brown went to Louisville.
Well, I know, but just because they're not as good as Florida State, I don't understand how you're ripping on his coach. Yeah, they are the worst 2-loss team in America. Just like I would say Florida State's easily the worst undefeated team, and actually I think that they're worse than all the 1-loss teams.
Well, they're definitely the worst out of the undefeated teams. There's no argument about that. As far as 1-loss teams,
well, you would have no argument about it. Do you
I don't think
if
anybody
we got a
would
Florida
argue
State
that.
show on right now, they would have a huge problem with it.
Oh, okay. Well, I would be willing to ask anybody that's not a Georgia, Michigan, Washington, any of these fans, it just take all those 3 fan bases out. Just ask anybody else. Who do you think is the worst undefeated team? I would hope that it would be 85-90% would say Florida State.
What do you think the point spread of the Pac-12 championship game is?
I will say Washington 1.5 points.
Oregon 7.5.
Jeez, man. I mean, I think Oregon will win too, but that's just disrespect.
How's it disrespect? They're not. These Vegas computers don't have feelings. They're not disrespecting anyone. They're spitting out numbers that are based on statistics.
Well, I mean, I was pumping up, Oregon just as much as the next person, but a lot of these wins now, they've lost a lot of luster. Like I was really big on Oregon after they went to Salt Lake City and just, beat the brakes off of Utah. But it turns out Utah's not that great of a team because Arizona demolished them just as much. The only thing is that I say Washington's had more struggle games than Oregon. Oregon, their big struggle game was when they went to Lubbock. Other than that, I really can't think of one off the top of my head.
No, they don't have any.
Whereas Washington, they did not fare well against Arizona State. They didn't fare well against Stanford. Trying to think of another one. Well, Washington State, today that wasn't a really good win either. I don't hold
prove a lot to me. I really don't think they're that good. They're good. They're a good team, but I think that there are 10-2 teams out there. I don't know that they're better than Penn State.
I would place them ahead of Penn State, but not by much. But there's a lot of subjectivity there. And I hate going against my own conference, but I mean Washington, they still have probably the best passing attack in the country. Maybe USC, but with them being 7-5, they're not part of the conversation. But as far as the top teams out there, they're easily the best passing offense. Their defense leaves a little bit to be desired.
Wait a minute, Washington is the best passing offense in the country by far?
Of all the contending.
Yes, I got you. Sure. Well, not necessarily better than Oregon.
I think the reason why I would take Oregon is that they're much better in the running game. Bucky Irving is a hell of a running back, and Washington's running game is a little hit and miss. That's why I would take Oregon's offense. If I was going to take one of the offenses, if I was going to take Oregon, it would be because of Bucky Irving. It wouldn't be because I would take, Bo Nix over Penix. And Penix has better weapons, with I'm big on Romadunze. I think he's a solid receiver. And I don't see his equivalent at Oregon. And that's not the only one. Washington's receivers are probably what I would say that's probably the third best wide receiver core in the country behind Ohio State and Texas.
Sure. I'll put them in that range. Florida State's close, and so is USC.
I was high on USC's wide receivers earlier on the season, but it looks like once Addison left, there was really no USC receiver that could kind of take up that mantle that he left. And with Florida State, I think it's kind of Keon Coleman and a bunch of guys. I think Keon kind of bumps up the illusion of the entire room.
Well, I don't know that Johnny Wilson is just another guy. I think he's going to be a fairly high pick in the NFL draft.
You think he's going to be like first 2 rounds?
Well, I don't follow the NFL draft in terms of mock drafts. So I don't know where he's being rated, but that's my guess.
It'd be interesting to see how it plays out. But well, like I said, I've already been on here too long. I'm sure there's probably a dozen people in the back room.
All right, Mike. Well, it's good to hear from you.
And I'll be looking, when I get out of the hospital, I'll be looking for your top 25 that makes sense. I better see Michigan number 1.
Well, if they've earned number 1, they will be number 1.
I'll be looking forward to it.
Okay, Mike.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. All right, let's rip through them. Let's see. We got, we had a few people hang up, so we're down to 4. Sean's here. Sean, what's going on today?
Oh, not much, Mark. Not much. Feeling a little better than I thought I would. Coming off of a loss in the game, but yeah, weird way it doesn't sting as much as the past two years. I don't know if that's just because the performance from the Buckeyes was much better today than
Oh yeah, it was
Didn't
much
test
better. They
well.
were much more competitive.
Yeah. I mean, the only problem is obviously living in Michigan, rooting for the other team, subjected to a lot of teasing, a lot of text, and honestly, a surprising number of them go over pretty far over the line. As far as I'm concerned, I keep thinking you guys have a lot of hubris for a fan base for supporting a team that's lost 16 of the last 20 of these games.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
it's like, I mean,
I,
we
I,
own you. You're
I,
our bitch. Like, no, stop. Come on, man.
I think that comes from getting your teeth kicked in for so long that if it was competitive all the time, and then they had a run of 3 straight, I think they're taking out a lot of anger.
Yeah.
And I'm not, when I say that, Michigan fans, I'm not talking about all of you, not talking about
No, I'm
everyone.
not talking about all of them
certain
either.
people are taking that out. People aren't going to be happy with me, and they shouldn't be offended in any way because I'm here to give my opinion. And I've said it about 3 times today, and people have taken it pretty well. I haven't seen any bad comments in the chat, but I know that they're coming at some point. I still think Ohio State's better than Michigan.
I mean,
And I think that game actually, not that it confirmed it, but after seeing it, I thought, well, Ohio State's playing on the road. They made the one big mistake in this game. I think a few other things were poorly executed or not executed. And that doesn't mean I think they should be ranked higher or that I think that my opinion should matter. I don't think that in any way, but I'm entitled to my opinion. And I just think Ohio State's a better team. Not by much. I think it's extremely close, but Michigan, they have all the credit for winning and will go on and play for a championship next week. And they should. The game was fair and square. It's not like I think that Ohio State got ripped off. That's not what I'm saying.
I mean, there were like 2 controversial officiating moments. One was the Roman Wilson touchdown interception. I think you got to go with. I thought looking at the replay, I don't think he ever really had possession of the ball, but you got to go with the call on the field because it just wasn't clear enough to overturn it.
Yeah.
And the other spot was a 3rd and 2. Cornelius Johnson got away with an absolutely blatant, just crystal clear push off for offensive pass interference.
Oh, yeah, that was called. Yeah, he extended his arms and just
Yeah. I forget who was defending it. Was it Hancock or somebody?
Hancock.
Hancock. And Jordan Hancock went back like 3 yards, and Wilson was right there.
Yeah, that was a big.
That was a very, very bad miss, but that can happen. I mean, that's just going to happen, and you got to overcome that, and they didn't. Yeah, so it was fair and square. I don't want to.
The play at the goal line, of course, as a fan, I was hoping that they were going to overturn it. I was hoping, of course. But as trying to be an unbiased observer, commentator, I was thinking, okay, take the rule book out of it for a second. Just watch football. And do I believe that that should be a touchdown? And the answer to me is yes, it should be a touchdown. Now, if you go by the letter of the law, and Joel Klatt was going through the letter of the law, he thought it should have been overturned.
I mean, like I thought it was pretty close. I mean, like I said, I didn't think Roman Wilson ever established firm control there, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. I just, that was not. That's not something I'm going to say we got screwed on. Yeah, the Cornelius Johnson one, that was a bad one. That was a bad mess, and it was very critical. But they got 2 or 3 more first downs after that they didn't need to get. So and there are some narratives going around after this. Obviously, like knee-jerk reaction from everybody. This Fire Day stuff is. is absolute nonsense. It's hysterical, and I don't like. I want to block everyone who's saying that. I just want to block them forever. I don't really like. At least when it comes to anything that happens in the moment, because like that just seems like just an insane emotional overreaction. This program is in fantastic shape.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, they've when I look at like the flaws this program had even like 2 years ago or something like that, when he's early in this head coaching career, is this the defensive structure, the physical toughness possibly. I think those have mostly been addressed and mostly been fixed. I don't think this was a soft team by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't think this is a team that lacks discipline in any way.
If Ohio State fans not only get past the sympathy and just being good-hearted people, put that aside. If they were truly good business people as fans, they would line up at Ryan Day's house and they would cheer him and celebrate him and pat him on the back and make him feel good about going to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's what they would do.
No, I mean, like, yeah, he's built an excellent program, and you can't just say it's the Ohio State thing. I mean, what other program? I mean, you put the wrong person in place in any program, it'll fall apart.
Yeah, there's
we've seen that
competition out there. Yeah,
we've seen it everywhere, like at every program, probably including Ohio State. But I'm too young to really remember a time when this program was really down in the dumps. But if you have the wrong people in the wrong places, literally every program in the country I've seen just flounder by a certain standard. They just everyone drops off except Ohio State. And I mean, so if they really was not the guy, I think we would have seen it net by now, except for obviously losing 3 straight to a very good team. That can happen. I mean, it can. I mean, you have to accept. I mean, you can't just be like purely results oriented. You look at look at how the guy's doing his job. I mean, they're getting top 5 recruiting classes every year. They're sending, 8, 9 guys to the NFL draft every single season. Guys are developing. I mean, where there are weaknesses, they seem to get, patched up pretty quickly. You've just lost a couple games to a good team. I mean, that is what it is. I know it's more painful because it's your rival, but that, it's no different than if we lost 3 straight to Penn State. It really isn't. Really, at the end of the day, it's not. If Penn State was at this level.
Well, I'm more in agreement with you than I would have been at any other time in my life, because I certainly grew up believing and treating this game, and I still do to a certain extent, to be special and to be unlike any other game. And I truly believed, like, if you would have pulled me aside when I was 20, and if you would have said, do you want to win the national championship or do you want to beat Michigan? Do you want to win a national championship and lose to Michigan or beat Michigan? I would tell you, beat Michigan.
Do you have any idea where that comes from? Like, I can understand why my perspective from it, because my perspective is a bit different, being an Ohio kid who was mostly raised in Michigan. And I basically became an Ohio State fan because, I mean, I was an Ohio State fan. My parents were, but they weren't real serious about it. I became intense about it because I was so annoyed. The kids that I really didn't like in school were so braggadocious, were so annoying about their Michigan fandom that's what drove me to become the Ohio State kid. Do you have any idea why you, as just an Ohio, probably grew up around 90% Ohio State fans, treated this rivalry so special?
Well, I'll make it even less logical than that, because I was telling Steve Dace this the other day, that I didn't grow up in a sports family. Like, I was not encouraged to play sports, watch sports, nothing. I did it on my own. I don't know how, why I started wanting to play football, baseball all the time, memorize statistics, watch every game possible, all of that. At the age of 8, just boom. And I'm watching the Ohio State Michigan game at the age of 8, and Bo Schembechler's being carried off the field. And I was so upset and angry. I was like foaming at the mouth, like throwing a fit, shaking my fist at the TV, hitting the TV. And nobody taught me that. I didn't see that behavior anywhere. I didn't grow up around it, nothing. I don't know where that came from. I didn't have any friends. I was 8 years old. I didn't like know 8-year-olds that cared about college football. Like, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. It's hilarious.
And if this was me 30 years ago after Ohio State lost to Michigan, I would be stomping around, sulking mad right now.
This was me a couple years ago. I mean, God, I went through such a long period of my life where the only time we ever lost was that Luke Fickell year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like it just grew foreign to me, like how much losing this game sucks. And it really sucked 2 years ago. Last year was like the worst. And this year, I felt like since they played, close to their standard of football, I'm just not really all that bothered by it. I mean, and this year was the year going into it, I like wanted to win it more than anything because I don't like this team. Like, I mean, there's in some ways I don't respect this team. I mean, like I feel like they've done a lot of things dirty and done them the wrong way, and I kind of don't, I mean,
Sure.
like just, I'm not a fan of them. If I was a neutral person, I don't think I'd like them at all right now. If I was on the West Coast, I don't think I'd like a lot of what I've seen from them. So I had a little extra motivation, a little extra juice going into it, and when
Sure.
it didn't happen, it didn't bother me that much. It's kind of strange, but
like in a sense, I don't understand what Michigan people expect when you see all this. First of all, I think this is way overplayed by everyone that does this, us against the world, whatever.
it's terrible.
Now, see, with them, they brought that on themselves. What would they expect? And again, Michigan fans out there, I'm not talking about all of you. I'm certainly talking about many of you. What would you expect if you were just an average college football fan who's rooting for Oregon or UCLA or North Carolina or whoever? You have no rooting interest in the Big Ten. Or if you're a Big Ten fan outside of Ohio State and Michigan, why would you not be rooting against Michigan? Why would that not piss you off and put a bad taste in your mouth?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I wanted to mention a couple things about criticisms. Well, one thing too first is the idea going around that Day was outcoached by Sharon Moore. I feel like this is mostly coming from people who aren't qualified to offer that assessment.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not qualified, but I think I'm more qualified than 97% of you.
Sure.
Like I know,
Yes.
I know what cover
to you
what
that
cover
you are.
is. What did you say?
Yeah. I said, I know from just talking to you that you are.
Yeah. And it's like, you know what? I mean, there's all these criticisms of days, certain decisions days made, and certainly you can have those, but God, they're so authoritative and so judgmental on all of these. It's like, you know what? I mean, is it right to question whether they should have gone for it on that 4th and 1 at the 46? Yes. Is it obvious what you should do? No. I mean, and
yeah, I heard from 3 different people on television today that Sharon Moore outcoached Ryan Day because he went 3 for 3 on 4th down.
yeah, those were every single one of those 4th down decisions he had were obvious. I mean, just not clear. Like Ryan Day would have gone for those, especially if he had like Michigan's team. You know what? Michigan's built to get a yard and a half when they have to, all the time, right? It's, I mean, like, yeah, that's just, I mean, it was just, yeah, I mean, like these flighty takes. I mean, nothing brings the know-it-all out of people like sports, and maybe especially football, college football. But we're talking. I feel like McCord has gotten a lot of heat for this. Some of it justified, certainly. I mean, one enormous mistake that was probably the most critical play in the game. That that was a very bad mistake. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But we're talking about how he just got McCarthy is just way better. I thought McCarthy was much, much better at the beginning of the season, and that gap has shrunk, in my mind, has shrunk throughout the year. And going into this game, I thought there was very, very little. And after this game, I think the only difference is McCord is a little more error prone than McCarthy.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is McCarthy can rely on his legs. He doesn't have to stay in there, and take risky throws. McCarthy made a couple risky throws today that worked out for him.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like, if I'm just assessing their abilities as a QB, I mean, I looked through the performance today. I think McCarthy averaged like 7. I'm going to look this up right here real quick. Yeah, McCord averaged 9 yards an attempt, and McCarthy averaged 7.4. Yeah, so I mean, and McCord got off to a really slow start, as he has a lot this year. I remember at one point he was 4 for 10 in the game. He finished 18 for 30. So that means afterwards he was 14 for 20, a 70% completion percentage. And I thought I thought he's not getting any credit because of those mistakes. He's not getting any credit for having some really good drives and some really good throws in this game. And it's just everyone's saying he's garbage. Everyone's saying just he can't do it. He can't be the guy. And I think it's just people aren't, if he would have scored that last touchdown drive, I mean, he's a hero, right? It's all or nothing, right?
Sure. Yeah. And he completed 2 nice balls, and then the pass rush got to him and affected the next throw. And that ball could have went somewhere and harmlessly landed somewhere, but it didn't.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So, you know what? I mean, I like the Michigan people on here, most of them. So congratulations on the victory. It was very much earned, completely legitimate. And yeah, I went to just talk for a second about the Jonathan Smith hire. He was the first name when Tucker got fired that I said that they should go after. This is he's the head of a homeless program, right now. He's obviously you don't really get many opportunities like this. A guy who's taken over a program at that level and had the success he's had, and get him to a place like Michigan State. Like, usually, those guys aren't going to places like Michigan State, aren't leaving what they have, especially a guy who is an alma mater. I mean, he had, that's one of the toughest jobs in the Power Five. And I mean, and he built it in kind of the similar way I think I've seen Michigan State succeed at before with D'Antonio. I mean, this is strong line play. You want to run the ball and play good defense. And that's and I think he's just a fantastic home run hire for Sparty.
Absolutely. All right,
Yeah.
Sean. Anything
Right,
else?
Mark. Nope. Just want to say 4th and 31 forever.
Yep. Have a good one.
Take care.
All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. I can see that my comment about Ohio State being better than Michigan rankled some people. That's fine. We all have our opinions. Just like Alabama's better than Texas. They lost the game. Texas should be ranked higher. Michigan should be ranked higher. They're playing in the Big Ten championship game, as they well should be. I am not omniscient or omnipotent in any such way to make sure that that is from on high. It's just one man's opinion. All right. Just like, wouldn't it be Michigan fans who said last year that they were better than TCU? How does that work? Bingo. All right. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Michael's here. Michael, what's going on?
Not much, Mark. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
Hey, you should start a counseling service, by the way, too.
I see that.
Yeah, nice. Hey, I gotta ask you.
They get paid more money. I may start that. I think it's going rates like $150 an hour.
Yeah, true. Hey, it'd be more money than you was making when you at your previous job too. Anyway, I gotta ask you this. Not if, but when it happens, what candidate do you think might be interested in the IU job?
Oh my goodness. Who would be interested in the IU job? Possibly the Toledo coach, Jason Candle. Who else is excelling at the group of 5 level? So whoever is a excelling offensive or defensive coordinator at the Power 5 level, or a head coach at the group of 5 level.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, did Wisconsin end up beating Minnesota today?
Yes.
So do you think that might be his long term for PJ Fleck?
Why?
No, I'm just asking. I'm just asking in general. I figure maybe he might
be. He had one bad season.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been there since what, 2017?
Yeah, and he's excelled.
Yeah, but no, back to the Mark Stoops. You
He went 9-4 last year.
Yeah, but maybe sometimes a fresh coat of paint can do the car good. But I digress. But get back to
wait a second. Where's Minnesota going to go get a better coach than PJ Fleck? They should be breaking the bank to keep him there.
True.
Not trying to get rid of him.
No, I'm not saying get rid of him. I'm saying he leaves on his own.
Oh, if he leaves on his own.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, I wouldn't. If I'm Minnesota, I wouldn't fire him. But anyway, getting back to Mark Stoops quickly. Do you think it kind of reminds me of like the Josh McDaniels deal a few years ago with the Colts, where they said they was going to do it, and then at the last minute, could be Stoops says, "Nah, I'm not interested in it after all."
Well, in the Josh McDaniels situation, did he determine that, or was that the Colts?
No, Josh McDaniels changed his mind.
Okay, sure. It has happened a number of times. Bill Belichick did that.
Yeah, I did that with the Jets, didn't he?
Yes.
All right. But no, I'm telling you this. I seen the highlights of the Purdue game. Purdue, I mean, yeah, it was nice that they retained the bucket for another year. But my honest opinion, the way IU is playing today, they should have never lost that game.
Yeah, I did not see the any of the game.
Yeah, 35-31 was the final score. I didn't see much of it either, but just wondering stuff like that. Now, that being said, if total chaos was to happen next week,
yes,
say Georgia loses, Iowa shocks the world, Louisville shocks the world, and Oregon shocks the world. You don't have no undefeated teams left. How are they going to figure out who the four is going to be?
Well, who wins the SEC?
Say Alabama, they get their heads out of their backside and just like literally beat the living. They play like they did 2 weeks ago against Chattanooga and beats them bad. Which I don't think is going to happen, but you never know, though.
Yeah, I don't see anybody beating Georgia badly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, Oregon's in the playoff. Texas is in the playoff. Georgia and Alabama are going to be in the playoff, and that's probably your playoff.
Even if Georgia gets smoked?
Yes. Who else is going to be there?
Say it was a close game between Oregon and Washington, and it's a reversal of like it was a few weeks ago.
Well, then you could keep Washington in, possibly.
Or do you think it could be Michigan?
I don't think Michigan's going to make the playoffs if they lose to Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Not bad. But no, I wouldn't try to get you mad like that. I'm not. I'm just saying. I'm just asking in general, how is Louisville? Because there's other 2-loss teams. I'm sure that might be worse than Louisville. Or just because they had the bad loss to Pitt this year. That makes them the worst 2-loss team in college football right now.
Based on my observation, I just scanned all the 2-loss teams in college football, which there aren't many.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State, Missouri, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Isn't that it? I can't think of any
I think
other.
so. I don't know. On neutral
That's
site,
it.
how many of those games does Louisville win? Or do you think they lose all of them?
They lose all of them.
Could be. I'm just wondering stuff like no. I'm not saying I'm a Louisville fan.
Ole Miss would be the other one. Out of
Yeah.
those teams, I'm going to say Penn State's the best, and then Ole Miss, then Missouri, then Oklahoma,
Okay.
then Louisville.
Oh shoot! Hang on. I forgot about my TV. Sorry, I didn't want you to get copyrighted. I would not let myself live down and stuff like that. Anyway, no, I was just wondering. I know you got other callers and stuff like that. Thanks, John, to send me for that and stuff. But no, anyway, enjoy the rest of your stream and have a good one, Mark.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
All right, 2 to go. We got Rob on the line. Rob, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, Mark? It's been a little while since I called in last. I've been kind of busy, but yeah, what a day for college football. My condolences on a close loss there, Ohio State. I was actually rooting for Ohio State, and I think that game was basically one interception away from having a bit of a different outcome personally, but
Yep. Yeah, a lot
like-
of different things could have happened. They could have made a field goal. They could have, there are just a few things, just like any close game.
And I do agree. I said it all year long. I thought Ohio State has been the better team for much of the season, in my opinion. That hasn't changed because of this game. I'm kind of with you on that. I think if they play again, especially if they played at Ohio State wins that game, no question. And this is the closest in the last 3 years that Ohio State has played Michigan. I think McCord, his inexperience kind of was a factor there, but I think overall, I think I would still pick. And that's the thing. We talked about, Michigan fans saying, well, how can Ohio State think that they're a better team when we beat them? Well, because Ohio State, this is just taking last year. It's not this year, but it's still an example of that kind of transitive thinking. Last year, Ohio State loses to Michigan and then takes Georgia to the wire, which they honestly were the better team. Like even Kirby Smart after that game against Georgia, he's like, man, we got lucky. Like he knew that Ohio State really should have won that game.
Yeah. And he's actually repeated that a number of times in the offseason.
Yeah. And what happened to Michigan in their playoff game? They got beat by TCU, a team that then went on to get absolutely bushwhacked by Georgia in the championship. So there is a reason why we think these things. Like, I think Ohio State's the better team, and that's not taking anything away from Michigan. Michigan's a heck of a team this year, and they're going to probably be higher ranked than Ohio State now, obviously by most people. But I still think if they play that game 10 times, I would still take Ohio State the majority. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of good games today. It's been a crazy day. I mean that Auburn taking. I mean, I could not believe that Auburn was beating Alabama in the fourth quarter, and it basically took an all-out, Hail Mary to get that game wrapped up for Alabama. Hey, but props to Auburn, man. For some reason, they all, no matter how bad they are for majority of the year, or sometimes if they're having a good year, either way, but they always seem to get up for the Iron Bowl. And Alabama kind of, hey, they just, I don't know if they look past them. I don't think so. I mean, that doesn't seem like a Nick Saban thing to do, but whatever it is, there's some magic in the water down there with the Iron Bowl. So it almost always is a pretty entertaining game.
Yep.
So that was kind of fun to watch. But yeah, what wasn't fun to watch was Notre Dame today. They were trying to give Stanford. I mean, I had people in chat. I hate this too. So like, this is one thing that probably all fan bases do. I've been advocating for Steve Angeli to get into the game more. Because okay, I get it. You want to be loyal to Sam Hartman a little bit because he transferred over, he took a chance, whatever. But at this point in the season, Sam Hartman isn't doing anything for you. In fact, he honestly should have had 4 interceptions in that game today. I think he only walked away with 2, but he also had a lost fumble. So he, multiple turnovers, and he's just not been playing well. Like the last, honestly, I mean, he had a good game last week, but aside from that, he's not been playing well. And I've been advocating for like Angeli to come in and get some reps because he is the presumptive starter next season. And all you're doing is like, if you're just letting Hartman play every single rep or almost the entire game for the rest of the season, he's leaving next year. I mean, what good does that do you? Your season's already a disaster. I mean, you've already lost 3 games. You're out of any kind of major bowl game. And this brings me to another point. What are the chances? Do you think that Notre Dame and LSU are going to play in a bowl game this year? They're both 9-3. They've played bowl games recently. I think the Citrus Bowl in 2017 was the last time they faced off, I think.
Yes.
So what do you think? What do you think if Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman face Brian Kelly and LSU? That would be awesome, I think.
I actually think, and I did not have this original suggestion. I don't know where this came from. I heard this somewhere, and I think this is a great idea. With the waning interest in bowl games and them becoming more and more meaningless, that there should be some type of cooperation among these bowl games and a committee overseeing these bowl games to try to find the most attractive matchups possible. And so they should look for those kind of matchups. They should look for people would want to see Brian Kelly coach against Notre Dame. So Brian Kelly, LSU against Notre Dame. It'd be one thing if one of them were 11-1 and the other was 6-6. No, but as long as they're comparable, which they are, yes, you put them on the same field. Lincoln Riley, USC against Oklahoma. We'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Any other angles that you can come up with that are like that, I think that should be done. That's like Joe Burrow's second to last year, 2018. There was an opportunity in the New Year's Six for Michigan to play LSU. Those 2 schools have never played in football. Never.
Wow.
And then you had an opportunity to have Florida and UCF play, which UCF's having this, remarkable year. They're undefeated and they could play Florida, heavyweight in their state. But no, instead, Michigan is playing Florida for a 3rd time in 3 years, and LSU is playing UCF. They should just, again, I think that there should be an oversight committee to make these bowl games more attractive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I still don't I don't pay too much attention onto what are the requirements for certain bowl game alignments and all this. Like, I don't really get into that. I know a lot of people do, but I'm just like, I just kind of roll with the punches and let the chips fall. But yeah, I think going back to one of the other callers who was like questioning why Alabama gets the, like, if the idea that if you asked an average audience, like, who's a better team, Alabama versus Texas, the reason is because Alabama has earned that, whether it's fair or not. And you kind of mentioned it, I think. There's a perception and an eye test, and I think it's more on the eye test, right? Like, I think we just look at Alabama and see, like, yeah, that's a really good team. Sure, they squeaked out a win over Auburn, but that's a rivalry game. I mean, rivalry games can get nuts. And I think Alabama, honestly, are they better than Texas? I mean, on a neutral field right now, I'm taking Alabama. I mean, Texas might win again, but it's kind of it's a bit unfair on one hand because Alabama, again, they're getting a lot of credit, just as Georgia gets a lot of credit for their past championships. A lot of people are kind of ranking Georgia higher than maybe they should be, but I still think Georgia's a really good team. But yeah, there's a reason why certain teams get preferential treatment from either the media or fan bases in general. But yeah, one more thing I wanted to talk about real quick. What are your thoughts on, like, the Heisman? Like, do you have a particular favorite? Like, if you were going to vote for a Heisman right now, who would be your guy?
I've not given it much thought. I've not really been into the Heisman thing recently. I used to produce Heisman videos, and I grew up really being into the Heisman. I do think that it's the most prestigious award in sports. People seem to remember more so than who won the NFL MVP. Nobody remembers. They just assume, well, Peyton Manning's got a bunch of them, and Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers have a bunch of them, but nobody remembers who wins the NFL MVP. But people remember who won the Heisman Trophy, who won the Heisman Trophy. So I do think that it's prestigious. I don't agree with the whole premise of the award going to the best player in the country,
Right.
just because the best player in the country could be playing cornerback or left tackle. It's a quarterback award,
Right.
primarily. And I have had in the past issues with Christian McCaffrey not winning the Heisman Trophy, Deshaun Watson not winning the Heisman Trophy. So I've disagreed from time to time. Now, this season, I have not looked at the numbers. I know that Jaden Daniels' numbers are through the roof. Without looking at the numbers, I tend to think of three things when I think Heisman Trophy. I think, number one, winning. I think number two, statistics. And I think number three, either having just clutch performance, especially as a quarterback, pulling games out of the fire, or if you're a wide receiver, if you're a skill position player, having jaw-dropping highlight kind of catches and plays. Memorable plays. So those are kind of my three components that usually add up to a Heisman Trophy win. Jaden Daniels, of course, doesn't have the wins. He's got the statistics. And then Michael Penix and Bo Nix have the statistics and the winning. To me, right now, I was thinking during the first half of the season that it was going to be Michael Penix. But right now, I would vote for Bo Nix.
Yeah, you kind of went over exactly what I was going to bring up in Jaden Daniels. I think it's really unfortunate that he's stuck on a team with no defense, because any other year, I think Jaden Daniels is a Heisman frontrunner right now. I mean, his stats are just, his quarterback rating is over, or his QBR, I think, no, his rating is over 200. It's like 208. Not to say that Bo Nix isn't also great, like he's at 189, but yeah, I mean, Jaden Daniels has insane stats, and he's been the heart and soul of that LSU team. So much pressure's on that guy every single game to just perform at a ridiculous level, that I think it just sucks. Like, my pick would go to Jaden Daniels, except for the fact that, like you said, winning has to account for something, and he's stuck with LSU this year. But yeah, Bo Nix was the other thing. Is like a lot of people. I think Mike Fort was on earlier talking about how he'd take Oregon or he'd take Washington's passing attack over Oregon. I'm not so sure I agree with that. I mean, Bo Nix has a better rating, more passing yards, more touchdowns, fewer interceptions. I'm not saying he's a de facto better quarterback than Michael Penix, but his quarterback rating is like 80% for the season. Like that's insane. Like he is such an accurate passer. I mean his completion percentage, not his
Yes.
rating. He's such an accurate passer that it's just, yeah, I don't know, man. I think Bo Nix is probably going to win the Heisman if when they do the rematch, you know, he has a good game and Oregon wins that game. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, Michael Penix's last 4 or 5 games have not been outstanding. You know, this weekend, I don't see them here, but his game today, he went something like, he threw 2 touchdowns and a pick. He barely threw for 200 yards. He was like 18 of 33. Last week, he went 13 of 28 for $162 and 2 touchdowns. The week before, 24 of 42 for 332 and 2 touchdowns. Week before, 22 of 30, 256, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Arizona State, 27 of 42 for no touchdowns and 2 picks. You know, he would be on my ballot, but I wouldn't vote for Michael Penix right now. And yeah, the unfortunate thing about Jaden Daniels is not just what you're stating. I think of it this way as well, that I wouldn't not vote for him just because of the 3 losses. It's that the other players are playing in such high leverage games down the stretch, and he's not. And that's not his fault, but
Right.
it's just he's not playing in must-win situations in championship impacting games.
No, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, that's not quite in his control, but the guy has balled out about as best he could this season. And I think I think if LSU had even one more win than they're sitting at now, you know, he might be in that conversation. But it is what it is. Anyways, good talk, Mark, as always. Yeah, I'll still, hey, maybe Ohio State can sneak in somehow, you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens with I mean, Notre Dame's already, they're in like the Mayo, you know, Whiz Cheese Bowl or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. This season's been a loss, but hey, I always say if you're gonna get beat by somebody, that's one reason I was rooting for Ohio State. If you're gonna get beat by somebody, you might as well get beat by the champs. So I was definitely rooting for them today. But hey, we'll see what happens.
Yep. All right, Rob.
All right. Yep.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.
Yeah, for me or anybody else to construe ways in which Ohio State's going to make the playoffs, I'm not going to do that necessarily, although it would make for a good video and people would probably watch it. So maybe I will, but I don't think it's definitely not likely. All right, final call of the night. We've got John on the line.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I got a couple things. I'll like speed run them. First thing is the Michigan against the world thing, and it's getting old. Yes, I'm a Buckeyes fan, but like, if you guys didn't do anything wrong, why did Harbaugh take the 3 game? Why are you fighting your linebackers coach? Like, let's stop acting like you didn't get your hand caught in the cookie jar. So stop with the Michigan versus the world thing. You got caught. Get over it. The Heisman thing I wanted to bring up. Would you consider, not that it'd be a good point, but would you consider the conference that you play in? Because the Pac-12 is known for not having defense. And someone did say in the chat that Bo Nix had to leave the SEC to put numbers up like this. Not Caleb Williams. Michael Penix had to leave the Big Ten to put numbers up like this.
Okay, well, let's those are a bit overstated. That's not that
Right.
there isn't some validity there. So yes, absolutely. The competition, the level of competition, and for quarterbacks, the level of defenses that they're playing certainly would go into my vote. Yes. Now, if you're talking about what the perception of the Pac-12 defensively is versus what the reality, I think we should look a little bit more into what the reality is. I don't know that Michael Penix wasn't, when he was healthy, putting up big numbers at Indiana. So it also has to do with the players around him, of course. He's got
Right.
much. Now, he did play with some good wide receiver cores at Indiana, but
Yeah.
not quite to this degree.
Was he the quarterback of Indiana against Penn State on that pylon game?
Yeah, he's the one that
Okay.
dove.
That's
to the
what I
pylon.
thought.
Yep.
Okay. That's what I thought. I just forgot what I was going to say now. Well, the playoff thing. Well, actually, no, the McCord. These Michigan fans talking trash about McCord. Ohio State fans talking trash about McCord. I just want to touch on both of those fan bases and talking trash about Day. To Michigan fans first, I mean, we didn't have to run the ball. What was it, 32 straight times to beat Penn State with our quarterback? I mean, there's been the last couple games, Michigan's had to heavily rely on their run game to, or maybe it was 23 straight times to end the game against Penn State.
That was 32.
Yeah, 32. You know, I called a couple weeks ago talking about is Ryan Day ever going to take the training wheels off of Kyle McCord. But I think other than the interceptions, of course, that first one, I'm not putting that first pick all on Kyle McCord. It was a great play by was it Johnson?
Yes.
Great play by Johnson. Marvin Harrison kind of stopped too. I mean, he's a beast, but I mean, he's not immune to fault.
Sure.
And these people that are saying that on that last interception, Marvin Harrison's got to keep running to try to break that interception up. He could have kept running and he would have had to dive for it, you know, to even try to break that up. The defense just got the pressure. I give Michigan their credit. I will give them their credit. The only fourth down call that I do question on Ryan Day's part, I think they were at their own 48-yard line. It was like 4th and 2 or 4th and 1. It was in the first half. I think he should have went for that one. You're right there at the midfield. You know, I think, I mean, you're aggressive against other teams. You know, you're against lesser teams, I should say. Why not just be aggressive against Michigan? But and then the end of the first half with Ryan Day, you have one timeout left. You're moving the ball. Why let 35 seconds tick off the clock just to kick a 50-yard field goal?
To leave Michigan with no time.
Right, but you were moving the ball, and it was only second down, though.
No, it's 4th and 2 when he kicked the field goal.
Oh, was it?
Yep.
Okay, I was listening to the radio. I'm sorry, I didn't know that. But yeah, that one at the 48, I do feel like he could have went for that one. When it comes to the way Ohio State can get in, I don't think Ohio State or Washington, or not Ohio State, sorry, Florida State or Washington is better than Ohio State. I think Washington's going to get absolutely boat raced by Oregon, just by watching Washington the last couple weeks and by watching Oregon. My brother-in-law we were watching the Oregon USC game, and we could not believe that in a matter of 2 plays, Bo Nix had 33 passing yards. You know, I don't like the way Washington's defense looks. And Florida State, I mean, maybe if they still had Jordan Travis, I think that was his name.
Yes.
I just don't think, even if Florida, is the committee really going to feel comfortable with Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, Florida State win? Is the committee really going to feel comfortable putting Florida State in there?
Oh, I don't think they're going to. If Florida State plays a similar game to what they played tonight against Louisville in the ACC championship game, the committee's not going to feel good about selecting Florida State, but they're going to have to pick them.
Yeah. Well, would you take an undefeated Florida State over a one-loss Texas Big 12 champion?
Are you talking about would I pick them to win the game, or would I take them?
No. I'm saying if you're the committee,
Yes.
you would put Washington in or Florida State in.
Yes.
Okay. And I think people are sleeping on Oklahoma State in that Big 12 game. I mean, I know they don't look good. Texas hasn't looked good for for a majority of the last couple of weeks. And where's the Big 12? That's held in Texas. That's held at Cowboy Stadium, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I know it's kind of a home game for Texas, but it's also right down the road from Oklahoma State. So I just think that they're sleeping. I think I'm excited to watch these other. I'm not even going to turn on the Michigan game. I'm just not doing it because did Michigan play Iowa last year in the Big Ten title game?
Purdue.
Yeah, that was close, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well,
I'm excited. I'm excited that they're doing away with the divisions in the Big Ten so we don't have games like this anymore.
If Ohio State fans want to still dream of a path to get to the playoff, then they're not going to want to hear this, but they need Michigan to win.
Oh, obvious. Yeah.
They don't want to create more. Yeah.
Go ahead.
They need Michigan to win. They don't need Iowa to be in their way and then Michigan to be a borderline playoff team, but have a head-to-head win against them. They need Michigan just to win and get in the playoff.
And I do want to say something to the Ohio State fans about Ryan Day. Well, you guys just stop it. Like, do you guys not remember Luke Fickell? Like, I understand us as Ohio State fans, we've been kind of spoiled, and people got to realize, Ryan Day did have Justin Fields and Ryan Day did have CJ Stroud. You all should, if you had a realistic mind, you should have known coming into this year that Kyle McCord was not Justin Fields and Kyle McCord was not CJ Stroud. He just wasn't. And I think he catches a lot of flack, and it's not right. Like, I wasn't too high on McCord either, but I've also seen good things from him. Now he's still staring down his first read. And I put a little bit of that blame on the coaching staff because they got to notice it. But yet they're not doing anything to try to fix it. Well, they could be trying, and McCord's just not doing it. But I just think people need to slow down on Ryan Day because, like I said, if y'all don't remember Luke Fickell, then go back and watch and see what the hell that season went. So. And there was another thing I wanted to say about the Ohio State fans, too. Because I'm an Ohio State fan. Yeah, I can't remember now. Oh, the Jim Knowles thing. The defense didn't lose us the game today. I'm sorry. Was you expecting us to go in there and shut their offense down to 7 points? We handed them 7 points. We gotta stop blowing everything out of proportion because we have been spoiled. And I do agree with you, Mark. I think Ohio State's the better team. They are. They're the better team, and people saying that JJ McCarthy is so much better than Kyle McCord. Yes, he's better than Kyle McCord, but like I said, we didn't have to rely on a running game to beat Penn State. Kyle McCord actually took us down the field a couple times against Penn State and threw touchdowns. Kyle McCord took us down the field against Notre Dame, led to the game-winning drive. All I'm saying is you knew coming into the season you had to lower your expectations with who our quarterback was. So. But congratulations to Michigan. I do think that was offensive pass interference, and the touchdown was a little borderline. I did want to ask you, though, my brother-in-law kept bringing this up. When a close play would happen, you know how McCarthy ran out of the pocket and kind of threw a ball out of his butt, and it got caught on the sideline?
Yep.
They got up to the line real fast and was able to snap the ball.
Yeah.
Did you notice how every close play that Ohio State had, though, the official was like, wait a minute. Like the catch that got reviewed for the fumble at the end of the game?
Yeah.
When those two plays happened for Michigan, they got to go up there and snap the ball immediately. But it was that catch at the end of the game, and then I forget the other play that happened. Like, they stood over the ball, and then they blew the whistle. They're like, oh, now we're going to review this. Not saying officiating had anything to do with this, but it did kind of look weird. But I don't know. I hope Ohio State gets into the playoff. I think they're the best one-loss team. I think on a neutral field they would beat Alabama. I think on a neutral field they would beat Texas. I think they could go to Texas and beat Texas. I don't know about Alabama because that crowd, I know Texas crowd is pretty rowdy, but Alabama's crowd is Bryant-Denny Stadium is crazy. And then people talking about the Auburn, how they were surprised about Auburn keeping that game close. They were in that game with Georgia too. Like, if they had a little bit better quarterback play, they probably could have beat Georgia and Alabama this year.
That is right. All right, John.
So,
well,
all
I
right, Mark,
appreciate you calling.
All right, you have a good day.
You too. All right. And super chat coming in from Ben. Ben says, been looking for a question to ask and show my support for the channel. Here it is. Mark, are you going to be rooting for Michigan to win next week? Well, Ben, thank you for the contribution. I appreciate that. Am I going to be rooting for Michigan this week? Well, let me put it this way. I have three different rooting interests in this game. One is just who I like better, like less. Who would I be rooting for? I would root for any team in the Big Ten over Michigan. So there's rooting interest number one. I'm rooting for Iowa to win the game. Just my personal feelings as a fan, rooting for Iowa. Okay. Point number two would be if you could give me circumstances to which there would be a path for Ohio State to make the playoff, which I believe is very, 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 very slim. They need Washington to win. They need Texas to lose. They need Alabama to lose. They need Florida State to lose to get to the playoff. So way too many things have to happen. But if you could tell me that those other things were going to happen, and I guess since this is the last game of the night, along with the other, the ACC championship games are going to be played at the same time, then I'll kind of know how the day's going. Yeah, it's going to help Ohio State if Michigan wins, if all these other things happen. But if they don't happen, no, I would rather have Iowa win the Big Ten championship. There you go. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. Voice of College Football. We got our top 25. It's going to come out tomorrow. Top 25 that actually makes sense. And this is the time of year where there's so much to go through that I really need to address coaching situations. Who knows what's going to happen between right now and this time tomorrow? We could have 5 different coaching vacancies or hirings to talk about. So I need to get on that. Like to release a bottom 10, need to start working on conference championship matchups. And I had about 10 things run through my mind while watching these games today that I should have started a list of content to produce because we need to be a little bit more intentional with our content. I waste a little bit too much time on certain content that people don't care about, and it's a big flat waste of time. So I'm going to stop doing that, hopefully, although there's never a guarantee on what content YouTube is going to push and that you're going to like. But I got to stop producing content that people don't want to see, and start producing content that people do want to see. That's brilliant, isn't it? Okay, so that's what we need to get on this week, and we will get you prepped for the conference championship games. Again, top 25 that actually makes sense. Please subscribe to our SEC and Big 12 channels. The links are in the description section of the videos. I've been on here for 3 hours and 9 minutes, and there's been no promotion. You know what we should do is, for like a straight week, is do nothing but run promotions on here and ads and sponsors all the time, because I am shortchanging myself and our channel. Our channel is not going to last with my poor business approach. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here. The Voice of College Football. We will see you soon. Go to games all the time, or you've got your heart set on that one huge matchup, go to ticketsmarter.com to save big. TicketSmarter technology gives you the best competitive prices on the secondary market. Your purchase price is safe and guaranteed. Use promo code BIG, B-I-G, to get $10 off of any purchase of at least $100, or the promo code BIG20, BIG20, to get $20 off of any purchase of at least $300. Use the promo code as many times as you'd like. There is no limit. Get in the game with ticketsmarter.com or the TicketSmarter mobile app. Think smarter, ticket smarter.